We'll open up this meeting in Hood County Board of Commissioners formal and informal session for October 15th of 2020. And what would I do about the date being at the top of my agenda? And let's begin with the flag salute. And Commissioner Sterritt, can you lead us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner. We move on to the calendar session, and it doesn't look like Carrie is with us today, so we will move on from calendar session. Did you have something you wanted to add, though?
No, I think we all are on the same, those are being noticed.
Yeah,
the
I think so
usual.
too. Yeah. Okay, great. We'll move on to public comment, and item D, and due to COVID-19 and physical distancing requirements, anyone wishing to submit general public comment or comments related to specific agenda items may do so in written format by email at bocinfo@co.yamhill.or.us or by mail at 535 Northeast 5th Street, McMinnville, Oregon 97128. Any comments received prior to the meeting will be shared with the Board of Commissioners and submitted to the record. And we have at least two public comments, or two comments, but they're related to our work session today. So we'll move on to item E, which is our work session. And item 1 under work session is review and discussion of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee membership ordinance. And we have our draft. You've seen drafts. And then we also, I'd like to note, thanks to Ashley, had the draft with the comments from the Solid Waste Advisory Committee members. And we also have with us both Ken Friday, our planning director, and Ashley Watkins. Would either of you like to update us on the SWAC membership now and how they view the proposed ordinance?
I would say that the last time we met.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Sorry.
We gotta make sure we take that.
I just want to make sure that we capture your comments and thoughts on it.
Ashley Watkins. As far as the discussion of the membership, the last time we really thoroughly discussed it was that in February and submitted it right before COVID happened.
Yeah.
And then COVID happened. So I think the big push is just making sure that all voices are heard, making sure industry is not dominating this situation. I think there was some confusion between that we were working on the ordinance and bylaws, and
Right.
I thought myself, we were discussing the ordinance. Once we established the new membership, then we work on the bylaws. So that way it's the new group working on it, not the old group working on it. So I know there's some comments, and I know Jennifer might have some comments.
Yeah, I'll invite her next.
Yeah, that's where we're at.
Okay, great. Director Friday, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Thank you.
Not at this point.
Okay, and commissioners, do you mind if I invite Jennifer Redmond Noble up for
Thank
public
you.
comment? Okay, we have one public comment, the card we've received from Jennifer Redmond Noble, and also a SWAC board member, or a SWAC member, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Oh, and can you state your name and your address for the
Jennifer
record?
Redmond Noble. I reside at 13500 Southwest Peavine Road in Greenville, Oregon. And I've been a member of SWAC, not even really sure how long, but for a while. And I was on the membership as a neighbor of the landfill, I believe was my title. As we had, I believe, 2 on the old, they've kind of changed now, but there were 2 neighbors to the landfill. And just a little history on what's been going on SWAC. When I first got on SWAC, Guy Mason was running SWAC, and I felt like it was really a citizen advisory committee at that point, and we had diverse views from across the county and people with different specialties. We had people who were very much knew a lot about and were engineers within the garbage industry and different things like that. And then things started to change. And as people's terms were ending who were anti-landfill historically, they were not told that their term was ending, and they were just told, thank you for your service, you've been replaced. And before, we'd always been told, hey, you're gonna come up, would you like to reapply for your position? No one ever told other people could apply too. They weren't even told their term was ending at that point. It is kind of hard to sometimes know just when your term is up on these situations. And so it was just too bad too bad that they were doing that. I actually went and found out after finding out a couple of others were just taken off, found out when mine ended, and went and wrote a letter to the commissioners asking to be reappointed at that point, because I felt like I was probably the next one to go. And in their place, a whole host of members were appointed, including, the manager of the paper mill and Newberg became one of our, I think he was the person who was supposed to be on some kind of a committee in the county. And, he told me privately, we can't really do anything against waste management because we owe them too much money. So I'm gonna vote with them, that's who we were appointing for this thing. We appointed employees of people who were, paid consultants for the landfill. We appointed just a whole host of people who had ties throughout this thing, and it was like really this has really lost its thing as a citizens committee at this point. Because if we just want an industry committee and you just want to know what waste management and ecology and those want to know, they'll tell you. They're obviously out there, this is their business, they're of course involved in the county and they should be. But if this is a citizen advisory committee with diverse views throughout the county, we always had people who were for, who were kind of against, but people would change back and forth and have good discussions. That all ended probably 7-8 years ago, when we had this whole other group who had really no interest except for voting anything down, voting exactly how the industry representatives voted on everything. And so it was kind of like, why do we even have a SWAT committee at this point? And I'm certainly not a non-business person. I'm a conservative farmer. I think we need garbage service. We need all those things in our county, but I felt like we're letting the big bullies with all the lawyers that fly in here and there from Texas. We'll have 8 lawyers, in a meeting, and different things would come in over the years. I think we're letting the bullies kind of push us around in our county. And I think if you guys, because you don't have to take our advice when we advise you, but if you actually want advice that's from the citizens of our county, you won't let the industry members vote, because to me, that's silly to have their votes in on this when you know what they want. But what do the citizens of Yamhill County want? And I just like to see a diverse board back up there again, with people from all different walks of life, and not people who've been, hey, I've got, the guy from Riverbend Landfill has his friend running for the board, and, this and that, and he's this. It's like, we need to try to at least try to get people who don't all have connections. I was told in a newspaper article, quoted by Sherry Knoxon, that I'm just the same as an industry member, because I have a dog in the fight too, because I have a farm near the landfill. I'm a couple of miles away, but nevertheless, I don't think that's the same as me being an industry representative who makes my living from the garbage service and the solid waste of the county. So I just think that you guys just have to decide and kind of look forward if you want a citizen committee, or you really just want to know what waste management and the haulers want to know. Because that's, I think, where we're at. And I just think it's kind of a useless endeavor for us when a lot of times I come to meetings and there's 3 people on the board that are industry. If we don't have a full quorum of 7, you have no, they're going to vote their way. It's going to always look like that's what we said. So I think it's unfortunate that the industry people vote on the committee. And I'm a little concerned about having a student, honestly, as a voting member, because I think that our kids don't necessarily have, and it couldn't be a kid, it could be an adult student, but I don't know that they have the knowledge and the history and the things to actually sit and actually have a vote. I'd love to have them involved and be another ex officio member who doesn't vote, because I love to see kids who want to get involved in our county and our community. But I'm not sure, because we have a pretty small committee, that they should have a vote at this time in our solid waste, because I think it's a complex issue, and nobody wants to make a child feel uncomfortable or look like they're feeling attacked or something because they disagree with some people. So I worry about that a little bit just going forward, because sometimes it does get kind of contentious, and adults can handle that, but I worry about a child being involved in that. That is all I have.
Do you have questions?
No, it's all some comments, but no specific questions for Jennifer.
Commissioner, do you have any
No,
questions?
I appreciate what you had to say, and I remember when I first became a commissioner, SWAC was one of my liaisons, and I would come to the meetings. That was 6.5 years ago. And so I've sort of seen the tail end of, one process and the beginning of another. but I do appreciate what you had to say because for the most part, I agree with everything that you're pointing out. If we don't have transparency in our citizen advisory committees, if people are being replaced, not being told their terms are up, I don't care what committee it is, it really is disingenuous. And if we put our imprimatur on any of that, then we are as guilty as sort of any kind of subterfuge that might be going on. So thank you for pointing that out. Thank you for being such you've always been very respectful. Despite all the disagreements, you've been very respectful and you've been very engaged in this, and I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
And in my experience, I mean, I would echo Commissioner Starrett's that in the short time that I've been the liaison, it has seemed from the casual observers that it's industry versus Jennifer Redmond Noble. So
That's exactly what it has felt like for the last.
okay, that's what it looks like from sitting out there in the
Yeah, I feel like
audience.
I'm just up there to like be the entertainment value sometimes because I know there's 4 of the people who are gonna sit there and vote, obviously, with industry all day long. And I'm sitting there saying, well, here's what I'm gonna say and I want this on the record and then off we go.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I might have been confused, but I thought this was a time, I do have comments and I listened to Commissioner Starrett and yourself. I thought this was a time that we were to ask specific questions of Jennifer, and we're not, so I might as well just go ahead and give my comments.
Please, you had some comments as
Oh,
well.
yeah,
sir.
yeah, but I was waiting for those for the discussion. But first of all, I'd like to say that on the committee appointments, I think I'm a very firm believer, and I've been trying hard to get it through that no matter, this just isn't about SWAC, it's about all of our committees, that if your term is coming up, you should first be given the opportunity to know your term is. And if people are real busy, they may not even know their terms are coming up, and giving you the chance to apply. Now, whether the commission accepts your application is another thing, but I think all existing members of every committee should be notified that their term is coming up, and not just SWAC. As far as the industry goes, I think it's only self-serving for the industry. I mean, by law, they have to serve on the committee, but I think it's self-serving to have them as voting members, that the industry should not be voting members. They should be members, but non-voting members. And part of the responsibility after the last several, before COVID and everything, before the last several SWAC meetings, is that one of the responsibilities of the distributors and the haulers and everything is to give us a report of exactly give the committee a report of exactly what's happening. It's been a long time, and recology is much better than waste management, but they have their faults too. But it's been a long time since we've actually gotten a report from those members that have sat down and said to SWAC with, well, these are the statistics, this is what we're doing, this is what we plan on doing, this is where it's just like, well, everything's the same. That's, to me, is not a report from a partner, from a vendor. So I think that has to be taken into consideration, that even though I think they should be non-voters, they should also be required where they give detailed reports, not that day, but also send out detailed reports to the committee to review before the meeting. And then my last thing is Jennifer noticed on the kids on being on the board. I personally do not feel that kids should be on the board. I think what I would like to see is have even the college students at Linfield, we have there, many are really interested in recycling, that I believe that they should be invited to be an observer on the board and observe the process, but from a voting standpoint, that they should not be a voting standpoint. So I guess that's the only comments I have.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. And then, thank you, Jennifer. I think so. What I wanted to ask then was either Calzado or Christian, with an industry member voting in the as we currently have it, do under state statute around ethics, do they count as a public official, and do their actions count as any action?
So the current language of the ordinance states that no franchisee shall vote on any matter in which they have a direct financial interest. So they are voting members, but when it comes to rate renewals and things that would directly impact those franchisees, they don't vote.
I just want to, that's different. I understand. No, I understand what the ordinance says, the membership ordinance.
So maybe if you could read
Yeah, so
your question.
under Oregon government ethics laws, do voting members who are industry members, how about this? SWAC committee members who are members of the industry and who hold voting rights, are they covered by Oregon government ethics laws?
Yeah, they're members of an advisory committee to the Board of Commissioners, so they are public officials in that capacity.
Okay, great. So realistically then, under that scenario, if they maintained vote, if under our membership status, they maintained voting rights, they would still be covered by potential conflicts of interest as well as actual, right? Or do they have to figure that out for themselves?
They're a public official subject to the ethics laws.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, and so a complaint could be brought against them.
I would just point out, if I could,
Please, yeah, because I think you have additional information.
we got an opinion from the state ethics board stating that because it's a advisory only, they don't award contracts, they don't make decisions on quasi-judicial matters, that they are not going to be having conflicts of interest. So,
Okay, so they don't count.
comment,
Sorry, Todd, they don't comment. Sorry.
they can vote and they can comment on matters that come before them. Even if it appears that there's some conflict of interest, even if they're part of the industry, because they are just making a recommendation to you, that whole record would come before you. You could decide who said what, why they said it. You're going to make a decision. So you're the ones that ultimately have a conflict of interest if there is one.
Okay.
Not a member of the solid waste advisory board.
Okay, great. I was trying to remember that advisory opinion. Thank you for addressing that.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
guess my only comment to that is I agree with the state law and I agree with the opinion both Christian and Todd gave, and I agree with what you're saying. But my concern is this isn't whether they should participate. I mean, it is whether, because I think their ability to participate in the vote, they also have the ability of trying to sway other members of the community to vote that way. Now, if other members of the committee elect to vote that way, fine, but I'm really concerned about the persuasive powers of the industry being able to convince the other SWAC members to vote, and that's why I'm certainly for a non-voter member status.
So, Commissioner, if I have this right, you think it's you think they shouldn't have voting rights, but that they should still be able to participate in the conversation, or you don't think they should participate in
Oh,
conversations?
no, I think they should be able to participate because
Okay.
that's why they're a member, but they should not be able to vote on any issue.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was interesting what Mr. Sadlow had to say, because that really does make the distinction as far as ultimately we need to be the arbiters of whether there was a conflict of interest and whether or not we accept that.
Mhm.
So that's kind of another backstop and another fail-safe, which is an interesting way to look at it.
That's what I was thinking about too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, Mary, you make a very good point. I think there's no doubt you make a very good point. My point is it requires another SWAC member or citizen at large to make a formal complaint to the Ethics Commission regarding they thought that this person should not have voted on this issue. Then all of a sudden, by the time it goes through the Ethics Commission and back to us, if they see it differently than we do, we're taking a process, a simple voting process. We can be dragging it out over 6, 8, 10 months. And I think that's where some of the governmental overreach is. Let us make those local decisions, even though the state says they can do it. Let us make those local decisions so things aren't every time the industry
Mhm.
doesn't agree with something, or anytime a member doesn't agree with the industry and they're voting, that they have to then, in order to get any action on it, to file a complaint with the Ethics Commission. I'm not for that.
I see what you mean.
I think it's government overreach.
Did I misunderstand that they would not be subject to any OGEC oversight because they're not elected?
Somebody could file a complaint. They are on a public body. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Christian.
No, I think that's right.
Somebody could file a complaint. We've just already gotten a letter stating that it's unlikely that any of them will engage the way we had it structured, how it's structured now. It's unlikely that they would be engaging in any kind of unethical decision-making under Oregon state law. So
I suppose that's
we
similar.
don't know where, you can always take somebody's name to the ethics commission.
And Todd, this makes sense to me kind of in the broader context. If we're going to put this into a bigger statewide issues, with rules advisory committees are generally staffed by or populated by industry, because they're the ones who know the challenges. And that's a advisory body at the state level.
That's good.
So we have that question in front of us, really, of voting members and not voting members. I do think that it's important to have their voices at the table. And I think that Jennifer would also, it sounds like, based upon my memory of conversations we've had, would also still values that. I do know that one of the SWAC members commented that they worried that the industry members wouldn't attend if they weren't voting members. And that's an issue that I would say I don't think we need to worry about. The industry needs to represent themselves, and that's the onus is on them. The onus isn't on us to give them an incentive somehow to be there.
I agree.
I do appreciate your point, though, about that we get to decide here whether or not we want them to be voting members. They do have to, by state statute, they have to be on it.
But they don't have to be voting members.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go back to my open remarks. I believe they need to be represented. I believe they need to provide better information than they're providing now. But I also believe they should not be voting members.
And if I may too, one of the other issues that came up when we were discussing this before was the fact
Sorry,
that,
Christian, I can't understand.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Without the committee being fully staffed, that was adding to the challenges. I think Jennifer was talking about that the board and the decisions and the voting they were making was being dominated by industry because we didn't have the full committee appointed. So there had been some talk around, well, let's get the full committee appointed and let's see if those same issues continue. If once you've got 9 members, that if you're still seeing the ability of those industry representatives to continue to dominate the conversation in ways that they concern is they have been.
Well, I might add, and then I'll, I'd like to add, and then I will invite you to return to the table.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we get your comments on the microphone. Is that my original position was that I thought it was fine. Like, this is my original position. It's basically what Christian just explained. But what I've consistently seen, and so I try to remember that it's not really my view. I'd like to hear what citizens, since they're the advisory bodies out there, consistently what I've heard from them is we don't want industry members as voting members, and we're fine with having a 7-person committee. And that's what I see when I look through the comments here, both the written comments and the comments that are kind of the inline text that Ashley Watkins put together for us in the draft ordinance. So I just want to acknowledge that given all of the comments, I'm perfectly fine with staying at 7 and moving them to a non-voting role. But I want to And invite, Jennifer, you had some comments you wanted to make around that.
Just quickly, I think what you guys want from us, I think, is the citizen advisory after we've looked at all of it. I think that you already all know where the haulers stand on every issue and where waste management, because I think that that's their job to do, and I think they're very good at telling you guys, what they would like to see. And so I think when you're having them as voting members, you're skewing what you think the Citizens Advisory Council is wanting, because if there's 3 of them, which there are, voting a lot of the time, or I guess there's 2, sometimes, I guess 2, but we've had other people on there that are practically a divided, industry also, but it skews what you're getting from us. So then you guys see, oh, it looks like there was this, but you're really just getting more input from industry than you need, because you've already got industry input on everything. So if you really want to know what the citizenry and what the council of diverse views looks like, then I think it kind of teaches you guys a little bit of what you're looking at each time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for those comments.
Well, I'll go back, Mr. Chair, to one of the comments you made.
Mhm.
That I'm fine after reading everything that Ashley's been. I'm fine with staying at 7 if the industry representatives are known voting, because I think there's a fair, and Jennifer brought it up well, is there's a lot of people that are connected to the industry that are citizens that aren't really part of the industry. I mean, they don't work for the industry, but they are very well connected to the industry. And that's my biggest concern if we keep the industry representatives. And the only other thing I could say is that, and I don't know if this would work as far as the ordinance goes, is that if we're going to keep the 2 industry representatives voting members, that any other citizen member who puts in for an application cannot have any kind of relationship with the industry. Because I know we have we have one of those right now, and it's, so that could actually change under 7. It could, if one other, that could sway the vote towards the industry, and I don't want to see that.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. How would, so if we stayed at 7 and we had industry as non-voting, would the 7 be voting members? And then what would a quorum be?
Well, I think if they're non-voting, then we would have 5. If we stayed at 7, that means there'd be only 5 voting members. And in order then for 5 voting members, a quorum to me would consist of 3. So if you don't have 3 of the voting members present at a meeting, then you couldn't take action voting on any action in front of the committee. I mean, the chance if you go to 9, the thing about it is you always have more of a chance of having a quorum to vote than you would with 7, because you just have 2 more at-large members or 2 members that are non-industry. So the chances of getting a quorum would be much greater, I think.
So if a member is a non-voting member, would they by definition be considered ex officio? Because other than voting and giving input, what is the difference between ex officio and a non-voting member?
I would say that my answer to that, maybe you have an answer. In my view, non-voting members are, for example, up here at the dais, non-voting members engage in the conversation and the dialogue as part of the normal process. Kind of like Ashley asks them a question. She says, for example, I've sent you the bylaws. Members, what are your thoughts on it? She takes notes. They have a discussion. That's to me what a member is, regardless of a non-voting or voting. An ex officio, I count myself kind of in the ex officio. If we're going to put it in terms of physical, I sit out in the audience. Ex officio members sit out in the audience. They only respond to things when called upon. So that's how I would view it.
Well, I guess,
Like, I don't participate in the conversations, for example, at RIAC because I'm not a member of RIAC.
I think Commissioner Stern, I think Mary brings up a very good point. My issue is that if state law requires them to be, industry representatives to be on the committee,
Mhm.
we have to have them on the committee. Now, the ex officio, I kind of agree with you, Casey, because I served as ex officio chair of City Water and Light
Mhm.
Commission for 4 years.
Right.
Almost 6 years. And the thing about it is that I'd sit there, I'd listen, I'd participate in the discussions, I'd do everything, but I just couldn't vote on any. I just couldn't vote on any.
Do you want to, Commissioner Starrett, what do you think the distinction would be between a voting member, a non-voting member, and an ex officio member? Do you have?
I think it's now we're just, I mean, to me, if we're required to have members of the industry on the committee,
Mhm.
what is the intent of having them on the committee if they're not to vote? I'm wondering if we could get to perhaps the intent of their,
The statute?
participation.
I don't have that information for me. I'd have to look and see what the requirements are exactly, unless Todd knows off the top of his head what the statutory requirements are for the makeup of the committee. But I think that's a fair question. If they're required to be on the committee, but they can't vote. And again, I'm kind of looking back as I talk
Mhm.
to the existing language of the statute, which says ex officio members, they serve as ex officio without a vote to advise and assist the committee. So it sounds very similar to what I think the situation you're mentioning is if they can't vote, how do they differ from ex officio members?
Do you pull up the statute? Thanks.
Does it say, did you happen to look at it? Does it say anything about whether they have to vote or not? So anyway, we can solve that. Am I answering your question or do you still have another
It
question?
doesn't say anything about voting, it just says members shall be, and they have the list of the.
Right, so they're required to be on the committee.
So for us, sort of that's an overlay. That is another element that we're bringing to their membership by saying, yeah, you have to be on, but you can't vote. So that's something that comes from
Yes.
us.
I think
Yeah.
that's right. And there was another question asked also about whether or not those two reps could be the chair or the vice chair. That would be another layer that if the board chose to put that limitation on as well.
So the way, at this point, just sort of, in the purity and the fidelity to the statute, if it says they can be members, it hasn't given the prohibition of them voting. That would just, I think they should have the right to vote. But I think that we need to look at the fact that we do then have 5 other members. And I can't imagine, and this is just editorial comment,
Mhm.
who else would want to be part of this committee other than people who had some concerns about industry participation, industry influence. And so the balance it's definitely not weighted, I would think, in the favor of industry, except when people don't show up. So do you then increase the numbers so that you'll have more people show up and then you still don't have people show up? So that's how I'm kind of approaching it.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I know that there were a large number of applicants for the positions, and Commissioner Olson and I decided that we wanted to address the membership roles before approving new members of it. But it doesn't sound like a 7-member board is going to have trouble into the future, or at least in the short term, with having a quorum, for example. But I do see your point. I think that to go back to an observation that Christian made, if industry members and the people that we've designated as industry members, if they're not going to vote, they probably should not be the chair and vice chair, because they won't be counting towards the quorum. If they're not there, you can't have a meeting unless we go back further and we say we have a vice. So
Right.
I can foresee that being a problem.
Well, I'll go back to something you said, Commissioner, and I think it's very appropriate, is if they're members of the committee, which statute requires them to be members of the committee, and they're non-voting members, if they take the attitude that, well, we're non-voting members, so we can't make a difference, so therefore we're not going to show up, that's their call. That's not our call. So whether they're voting members or not voting members, if we make them not voting members, and they like, well, since I'm not a voting member, I'm not going to show up, that's not our issue. That's their issue. So.
Right. As far as, I appreciate the comments about the, well, if they're not industry, they're going to be against industry. And I think that I can see scenarios where they could just be against the garbage industry, but or the recycling industry. I don't actually know anybody in those categories. I do know that there are people who have specific issues, say they're a project or an axe, that they want to focus on. But I think that's what we get when we ask people to put their hands up, is we get people who have an interest in the greater, either a specific thing or the bigger thing. And so somebody might be persuaded by an industry argument for something. And that's the power of somebody being a member and being here, even if they're not voting, is that they can present their case up here as equals. But so many people out in the community have very complex lives and thought processes. And I can see them one day being like, I agree with you on that thing, that advisory opinion from industry. And then the next meeting say, yeah, I see what you mean. Person who wants to not have any landfills in the county immediately. So I definitely see that there's a lot of complexity out in the community. I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I see is that you're exactly right. We're going to have those, but not to shirk our responsibility. On membership, it will be the committee's responsibility to give us the information on what they recommend or what person, if somebody applies. But in all reality, it's up to us three to confirm their appointment. And if we think that a person does unfairly represents, like a Stop the Dump coalition, unfairly represents the community one side, or somebody that's strongly in favor of the bill, we make that decision, not the committee. We only take their advice. So that's where I think that our responsibility becomes even more important. When we look at the individuals brought in front of us, we can either accept the recommendations of the committee, or we can elect not to accept the recommendations of the committee. So it's really our choice.
And I would think that just being involved with Stop the Dump should not preclude anybody from
I don't think it should be a
participation.
vote. I use that as an example.
Right.
That we should determine that. It should preclude anybody. But when it comes, if we feel, yeah, this person's a member of the Stop the Dump, but that's okay. Or we figure somebody comes forward and they're for the landfill. Well, what we see, they're for the landfill, yeah, but that's okay too.
What were you going to say?
Well, I certainly don't want to be, to prejudge, to be prejudicial against any committee applicant because of their affiliations. I think if we have industry representatives that can vote, we can check that box. And then we've got 5 other people who come before us. Clearly, if there's a demonstrated bias towards industry, we would want to vet that. But I don't want to start getting into how many for, how many against. That defeats the purpose of the committee.
And that wasn't the purpose of my remark. The purpose of my remark is that the final decision really lays upon us, not upon the committee. So as a commission, it's our final say of who gets appointed to these committees and who not. Hopefully, like we do now, 99.9% of the time, we accept the recommendations of an advisory committee. But there may be, and if we do that, that's fine, because then we've given our blessings to what the community has done. So we are involved in that. The other thing about it is that as we go down that line, well, no matter what we decide, whether they should be voting or not voting, my observation, all the meetings I've attended, is that we need to have something that requires the industry to provide detailed reporting to the committee. And I've been to several meetings where even Nick, from Waste Management, he says, well, everything's going just fine. We had this one little issue, which actually turned out to be a big issue according to state DEQ. We've had this little issue. Well, no, it wasn't a little issue. It was a major issue. But the committee wasn't informed of that, so.
So I remember the detailed reports were usually or only when there was a rate increase requested. There was a lot of information, a lot of statistics, a lot of numbers, and a pretty detailed report, but that's the only time I've ever seen one.
Yeah, and I think the detailed report that they should be required should also be not just the budget time of a rate increase. And every meeting should be a detailed operational report of what problems they've had, how many complaints have been filed, what the status of those complaints are. Things such as tonnage should be included. All of those things should be included. And that's the things that the industry is not giving the SWAC now.
So one question.
Go
Go
ahead.
for it. And then I was going to ask, would requiring something like that is a question for council?
It's actually in the statute.
Well, the statute talks about what the purpose of the
The
committee
ORS.
should be.
Right.
Okay.
But I was looking at our ordinance now. Do you recall if the ordinance gets into, the current ordinance, Ken or Todd, the existing ordinance gets into details about the kinds of reports and the contents of those reports?
I don't believe so.
I
No,
don't think
that's
it
not
does
what I'm
either.
seeing here.
And I think it should. I think it should, but that's just my.
Before we go
But I think
out
to Ken's point, the statute talks about what the duties of the committee should be. Is that what you're looking at?
Yes,
Yeah.
459,
Right.
325. Under subsection 2 of that, it says providing a forum for citizen comments, questions, concerns about the site. I'll just summarize it. Committee shall prepare an annual report summarizing the local citizens' concerns and the manner in which the owner or operator is addressing those concerns. And there's more to it in that language.
Now, that statute was actually written when there were two committees, the Regional Disposal Site Advisory Committee and the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. Those have since been combined.
Yeah.
But the spirit is the same. You can accomplish both purposes by seating one committee if the committee follows the guidelines set out in the statute.
One of the concerns I had early on, and when I came to this sort of fresh, I had some concerns about the very fact of a government monopoly, a government sponsored monopoly. And I had to really work through that process as to why it exists. But I did have some concerns. When you have a monopoly, you really don't have the constraints of the competition that can allow people to go where they're getting better customer service. So for instance, when we're aware of people having problems with waste management customer service or waste management or recology, they have nowhere else to go. And so to me, I think that we need to have more of a oversight or more input as to what the customer concerns are, because right now people don't have an option.
You make very good points. I think you make very good points.
Sorry.
I think you make very good points. What would that look like in the context of SWAC? Maybe those reports.
In reports.
Yeah.
But I mean, legitimate.
Yeah.
So in other words, if you're cooking the books on how many people are complaining about your service, you don't say, I got a lot of calls and letters from people who said, I can't get through to you. I can't get anybody on the phone. I can't get pickup or whatever.
Right.
And we don't know that.
And we don't know
We
that.
don't know that.
I think my next question then along those lines would be one probably for Ashley. Sorry to put you on the spot. Do you think that kind of what the commissioners are proposing would be more appropriate for bylaws? And I ask you specifically because you spent a lot of time thinking about the difference between the membership ordinance and bylaws.
Yeah, I think having it in the bylaws would be more at the local level, that way you could require that and not having that information here.
The only reason is that if there are people listening, like Ilse Paris, for example, she might not be able to hear this.
Right in the corner. I think having what the commissioners presented, having that in the bylaws would be beneficial as that we can keep it more at the local level. And having that information would be beneficial. I do know people have called me regarding like getting it a mailer, and I've resolved it by reaching out to the local site manager, but I think having that information would just be very helpful, because like when I do my hazardous waste events, I send out emails for reply backs, and I have about 100 of them right now. So it's good to have that feedback, so then you can see what changes you need and what growth can be made. So.
Yeah. Well, while you're up here, can I ask you another question?
Yes.
Commissioners have talked about, and people in the community have expressed not getting the, say, a presentation that happens at SWAC beforehand. Like a report from Waste Management or from Recology. It does say that the coordinator will distribute agendas and minutes from the prior meeting in less than 72 hours. And I know that you do that because I get the emails. Is it feasible to have them put their presentations in that agenda packet? Okay.
It'd be very easy to get it online.
Okay. Yeah,
Because
that's,
I think, we're the governing body. If we say that they have to have it to actually 96 hours or whatever advance report, what they want included in the packet, we're the governing body.
Mhm.
And if that's what we're telling them that we want to do, I think it will be up to them to do.
another question, and this is actually amazingly, this is related to, I guess, the difference between the bylaws and the membership ordinance, is that there's been a lot of questions, and I agree with them about whether it can be made a monthly meeting. Just because I go to RIAC, and so I know that how important that consistency is from one month to another. And it sure seems to help with, oddly enough, with membership attendance, because it's part of somebody's regular rhythm. I could see adding monthly to bylaws as opposed to in the membership ordinance, because right now it says at least 4 times a year, or as deemed necessary by the committee. Do you think that that's a reasonable thing? And I know that Ken Friday has also weighed in that they can have more if they want. But it seems like, what do you think that putting it in the bylaws would be appropriate as opposed to an ordinance?
Yeah, just, I know as of right now, just because as other counties, like, we don't run a transfer station, we don't run a MRF, we don't have our own landfill, where they're reviewing those items monthly because they have to look at budgets and numbers. We don't have a lot of those programs. I think maybe requiring monthly would be hard to come up with topics each time until we got more of an idea of where we want to go with this program. Especially how, our funding is through fees and everything, the stability of that, and then looking at what programs we may want to implement, if those fees will stick, run those programs. So I'm definitely for more meetings. At this point, I don't know if requiring monthly meetings would be appropriate.
Yeah, so it seems like that would be a scenario where if the newly reconstituted SWAC decided in their bylaws that they wanted monthly, they could do that. Okay, I think to me, that's a good compromise, is let them decide rather than us deciding for them.
Exactly, and maybe even making them bi-monthly.
And just to clarify too, there is a statement in the existing ordinance 3.5A that says one of the duties of the committee is to compile an annual report containing its recommendations, if any, regarding proposed changes or additions to regulations promulgated by the board or amendments to this ordinance in order to carry out the intent of the ordinance. So it's there, which I think reinforces the idea that it would be appropriate for the committee to develop the detail around how it meets that requirement in some bylaws.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Christian.
I think, Commissioner, you bring up some good points. I think a lot of what I've heard basically should be the responsibility of the new SWAC to put them in the bylaws, and they should not necessarily go in the ordinance. The only thing that, again, is the voting versus non-voting. I definitely have a problem with them being voting members, but I think everything you say of letting the new organized committee determine when they want to meet, how often they want to meet. I'm fine with all that. I think that probably does belong in the bylaws and not the ordinance.
Agreed.
And then I think that, okay, thank you, Commissioner. It was my idea to offer a student position, and I take the comments about the suggestions about ex officio. I think that's totally reasonable. Essentially there's an A through G, and if we put an H on there that says a student from the county, I would help to call that out so that students would know that they have the opportunity to come, provide comments, observe a meeting in person and how they are run.
And that's what
So I'm fine with moving it from a voting member to an ex officio, but I'd like to have it there. Sorry.
I agree, and I think
I agree.
that Jennifer's comments are well taken in terms of just the students might be a little bit green, if you will, on process and things like that. It might be a little premature to have them be a voting member. And I think if just getting involved and being part of it and witnessing the process is great, but throwing somebody into that role as a voting member, I think might be a little too soon.
Well, the nice thing about ex officio, and Casey, I like your idea, because it's not just about SWAC. It gives our high school or our college kids an insight into how government works and what an ex officio is and everything. So I'm glad Mary brought up the conversation about ex officio, because for a student, I'd be more than happy to have an ex officio student or a student who serves in an ex officio capacity on the committee.
Okay, and then I think we had a lot of things that have gotten clarified.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure, rather than being like, are we going to determine the vote or no vote, that we get through some of the other things. And I think that you're right, that I think we've come now to, do we have industry members be non-voting members or voting members? For me, I originally was like, I'm fine with them being voting members if we have a full advisory committee that provides for a diversity of opinions, such as what Jennifer Noble suggested. I think that in hearing from a lot of people, including members of the advisory committee, I think it would be better to go to non-voting members, and so I changed my mind on that. But it's been a year that I've had to consider it. So but I know that you've expressed that you are happy to keep them as voting members.
Because of the numbers, when you look at 2 versus the 5, at least at this point, the 5.
Yeah.
So I think that it's not weighted in their favor. So allowing them to have a vote is not necessarily going to be overbearing.
Yeah.
That's a question for Kristen, or for, I guess, maybe for Todd, since they're the most, he actually could probably answer this question. Is that the quorum, is that of members present or of board members? Because what Mary just went back to, if there's 7 and 2, and the industry is voting members, that leaves 5 who are not voting members. So does that mean if 2 of the non-voting members show up, that it's going to be tough to even, because you're talking about a 3-2, you're going to talk about a 3-2 vote.
You have 5 voting members and 2 voting members. So you have 7 voting members and 2 from the industry and 5 not from the industry.
Right. And
So
but
you've
that's
got-
what I was getting at. Is it those voting members present? Or is there another way voting members can vote? Because sometimes it's like says, if they're not present, then it's like us. If, unless we have 2 commissioners at a meeting, there's no vote.
So they can't vote, but they can't vote, but you've got 7 people. If one person doesn't show up, you
I think what's happened historically is it has been a quorum of the members present.
Okay. And that would just be,
I thought it was voting members, so.
well, see,
But
and
they were
that's
all
what I
voting
need
members.
to
They were all
clarify.
voting members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you have 5 people there, you have a quorum, and the quorum is 3. If there's 7,
Yes.
Yeah. But have you had situations where you only had 5 people there and you
Yeah,
conducted
we had
business?
we only had 4 people there.
Yeah, because your quorum was,
Yeah,
was,
yeah, you
was,
know, two or yes, three. We've had situations where there
So-
were three, and I think they
Right.
subsequently changed it and almost three.
right. So in theory, if you had 5 voting members and 2 non-voting members, a quorum of 3,
Right,
to
so if
conduct
one of
business.
those one of those voting
all voting
members,
members.
not representing the industry, if one of those voting members, even though they don't work for the industry, is really a industry backer, then basically that's change of 3 to 2 in favor of the
Yeah.
vote 3 to 2 in favor.
I mean,
of
at the risk of getting beyond sort of my legal analysis, I think that's an impossible question to answer.
Yes.
You know, what does someone have in their head when they come to the committee meeting? Are they an industry backer? Are they a non-industry backer?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the best you can hope to do is when you have these applications in front of you for membership on the committee, you can try and evaluate whether or not the person fits the slot that they're designed to fill,
Yeah.
and then hope that they carry out that role appropriately. People's minds might change throughout their times on the board, right? Someone who believes that they support the 2 franchisees when they join the committee may learn much more about the solid waste process throughout the county in their time on the board and may end up changing their position during their time on the board. That's sort of, I think, the intent of the committee, is to have a diverse number of views present.
Yeah, well, I'd say I'm still for not making them non-voting members, but if they were to stay voting members, then I'd be in support of expanding the committee to 9 members instead of 7 members. But
That'd be something that we would let the, sort of put into the bylaws? Or is that something that has to be done now?
the ordinance would have to have the number of members on it.
Yeah, the last amendment to the ordinance reduced the number from 9 to 7, so it's 7 right now. If we were going to change the number to 9, that would be an amendment to the ordinance.
So if we're required to have 2 industry members and we have 5 non-industry members, then that gives us the 7. I don't feel that it would be beneficial to increase it to 9. I think you've got it covered there.
I think that if we leave it at 7, that we should make the 2 industry positions non-voting.
And that's my feeling. If we go to 9, I still like to say, well, we went to 9. I could live with having them voting members. But, if they were to remain voting members, I would like to see us go to 9. Just so we make sure that we don't have meetings like we've talked about before, that we don't even have a quorum because we only have 4 people show up. And that is a reality. I mean, that's a reality. It's a reality with any committee. So I would like, if they're going to stay voting members, I would like to see 9. And if they're going to be non-voting members, I'm fine with 7.
Well, right now, the draft, right? The draft is 9. The existing is 7, and the draft is 9.
The existing language in the ordinance is 9. There was an amendment in ordinance 676. It was amended to reduce the number to 7, but it didn't change the list. So the existing ordinance still lists up to 9. So another question would be, if you're staying at 7, do you want to make some sort of adjustment to the way in which those 7 are selected? The statute provides 5 general criteria, which I think our ordinance currently covers: residents residing near or adjacent, owners of real property adjacent to or near, persons who reside in or own real property within the county in which the site is located, employees of the permittee, and local organizations and citizen interest groups whose majority of members are either electors in which the site's located, own real property in which the site's located. So those are the 5 general categories from which you're supposed to draw your committee members. So if we want to stay at 7 but make 2 non-voting, even though we have an amendment that already says it's going to be at 7, I would suggest you make amend the ordinance again to say it's still at 7, but 2 are now non-voting.
Right.
Because that will change the level at which you can have a quorum. Right now, this latest amendment says we're reducing it from 9 to 7 so that you can conduct business when there are only 4. This latest change would be also saying you will also be able to conduct business when there are only 3
Yeah.
voting members.
I think the makeup of the committee, the list pretty much gives a lot of weight to people who live near the landfill and are affected by the landfill. And so that right there gives that voice. So that's why I think ostensibly, if you have industry members voting, you also have people who are impacted by the landfill who are voting. And there are more of them than there are of the voting industry members, except, go ahead.
No, if I could just remember, those criteria were written into the statute when you had the 2 separate committees, the Regional Disposal Site Advisory Committee and the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. Our Solid Waste Advisory Committee now performs functions beyond what the Regional Disposal Authority or Advisory Committee originally would have. So it covers nuisances, code violations, solid waste accumulation as well. So it would be appropriate, in my view, to take those other elements into consideration, that this is a committee designed to sort of address broader county-wide solid waste issues, not just
Right.
in the proximity of the disposal facility.
Right, which is with the proposed draft ordinance.
And I think that's what our ordinance sort of already tries to accomplish, right? 4 county residents selected with due regard to geographical considerations. So you're trying to make sure you've got folks from different parts of the county.
And that's what we do on RIAC as well.
Right.
And that's really the main consideration is geography. So particularly at RIAC.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
what you were saying, but
no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think the truth is what Christian said is the fact is even though those are in our ordinances, the fact is you're not going to get people to volunteer for communities or for committees that don't have an invested interest one way or not. I mean, we've seen it with SWAC, we've seen it with RIAC, which RIAC is probably, I think, the best functioning committee we have. We've seen it with the trail. We've seen it, unless you have a specific issue, you're not going to address. So being the only issue we have now on solid waste is really the Riverbend issue. I don't expect we get a lot of people from around Newburgh, Yamhill, Carlton. It's only going to be the majority of the members are going to be members that are really interested in what happens at the landfill. So
if you recall, under the current ordinance as well, though, when we have issues with particular property owners who neighbors may have filed complaints against them for solid waste accumulation, those issues may ultimately get to the Board of Commissioners, but they do initially go through the SWAC committee. So they will hear matters beyond the specific disposal facility. And I want to correct something else I said. It doesn't appear that, unless I'm sort of reviewing the ordinance on the fly here, but it doesn't appear that this list of where the residents are selected from is in the current ordinance. So I think that would be new language if we were proposing to add that.
That's right.
The 4 county residents, the 1 business rep not from the solid waste industry, 2 reps of committees that hold a county solid waste franchise or license, 1 public interest recycling waste reduction representative, and 1 student representative. So if we're not going to end up going with the student representative, we would probably amend that further to remove that and then adjust those numbers so that you had a good representation from among the 7 who were going to continue to remain on the board, on the committee.
Right. And then just one other thing that I noted, there was a comment, or there was that Ashley highlighted regarding the minutes should include at least the following information. And then she added, and I can't remember if this was a committee suggestion or whether it was just Ashley's, but to add the public comment in there. And I think that's a really good thing. So I'd like to see that changed.
yeah, I think public comment should be almost any committee we have, or that public comment should be a part of it.
I think it should make sure that it be part of the minutes as well, so that people know what happened at the last meeting and what people were talking about. And I think that comes back to Commissioner Sterrett's comments about when there is a monopoly, that we want to be sure that we're capturing the concerns out there from community members.
You know, if I look at the voting, non-voting issue again, I think about it, the thing that really, I guess the reason I'm for making them non-voting really doesn't have to do whether they should be voting or not. It has to do with the information that the industry, the information that the industry is required to provide. Because I'd say sorely lacking, that's what's really lacking. They're not providing any for the solid waste, in the solid waste committee to really look at or make a decision based one way or another, because they say everything's okay. Well, okay. And that's the only report they give. So that to me is almost more of an important whether issue. I still want to see them non-voting, but my most important issue is the information they provide, the vendors, the industry that provides to the solid waste.
I agree, and I think they need to be specific about the complaints they're receiving, the numbers of complaints, the nature of the complaints, how the complaints have been resolved, because people really truly don't have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
With those.
Do you recommend that this be included in the 3.5, which is the duties of the solid waste committee? Because you guys have said it enough that I think it's realistic that we should probably include it in the membership ordinance rather than relying upon the bylaws for that.
I think if it's bylaws are great, but I think from a legal standpoint, to have something like that in the actual ordinance itself may carry a little bit more weight to it.
I agree.
Just looking at where.
Because in the ordinance, that way, if they don't provide that information, which the solid waste committee told them, what SWAC told them to provide, if it's in the ordinance and they don't provide it, I think that gives us a little bit more teeth on taking action.
So you'd like to see specific, the annual report to include specific information around complaints, nature of complaints, resolution of complaints, and what else?
Yeah, just like that, and I guess it would be a complaint or action with other agencies like this last thing with DEQ, where the issue was much bigger than Waste Management led it to believe once DEQ got involved. That's things that I don't think was ever said to the SWAC might have been told that there was an issue they were working with DEQ on, but the magnitude of that issue, I don't think they ever got back to most of SWAC members. So,
Ashley, was that regulatory, that DEQ issue at the landfill, was that discussed with the committee at any point in time?
you're doing good, Ashley.
I know how to turn the microphone.
Are you talking in regards to EQ or the NOV that they got from EPA?
The EPA, in a way, they got.
Way to give us
Yeah, either.
alphabet.
Yeah. Notice of violations.
There you
go.
Right.
It was forwarded to me, but the meeting was after, the letter was just forwarded to me in July. So it wasn't anything that was ever discussed. I've been emailing the person in my DQ contact about what was kind of going on and got no replies for several months, and
Then you got it.
So it wasn't something that came before and was discussed by the SWAC committee. Have those kinds of letters come before the committee before for discussion? Have those issues been raised by either the industry members or folks who aren't on the committee before? I'm just trying to get a sense if this is already something that's part of your standard practice or if this would be something that would be new in addition to.
yeah, and as I knows, usually they give us they give us an update, and it's like, oh, we've got numbers, that type of thing, nothing that's really like.
More metrics around tonnage and things like that. Okay. So you'd like the permit holders, franchisees to report on regulatory notices that they've received from state or federal regulators?
Yes.
When you put it that way, yes.
Yes. And I have the other issue, not an issue, the other suggestion I would have is I think Ashley puts it very well. Ashley works working with the EPA once she got the letter trying to email back and forth and hasn't gotten any response until we go about from EPA. It's whether we as a county and our solid waste administrator, Ashley, should have at least sent a heads up to since we didn't have a meeting of the solid waste, to the solid waste committee, letting them know that we did get this from EPA, this notice did come in from EPA, so they can even track it themselves because they'd be aware about it. who knows how many maybe SWAC members weren't even aware about the EPA.
Agreed.
So I think it's up to us too, and not just up to the committee.
Okay, anything else you'd like
Under
to require
3.5.
the
Under 3.5.
franchisees to include in their annual reports?
So,
Well, just again, kind of complaints, resolution
Mhm.
nature.
Let me
that kind of
clarify
thing.
that I don't see that as an annual report. That should be at a monthly report, the number of complaints and everything. I don't want to go all year and realize, Jesus, there were 650 complaints.
So is the committee going to be switching then to monthly meetings or still only quarterly meetings?
Well,
Just say at
whenever
every
they-
meeting.
Whenever
at
they
each
meet. I don't want it to be an annual report. I want it to be wherever there's a meeting of the solid waste committee that are scheduled out, that the vendor or the industry will provide that report.
Okay, all right. So at each quarterly meeting, updates on complaints,
Each
resolution.
meeting, now whether it's quarterly or not,
Right,
whatever the bylaws determine the meeting.
Okay. And then notices from regulatory agencies.
Yep.
Anything else you'd like to see in those reports? I don't know if Jennifer or others have thoughts on what else might be appropriate to include in those reports.
I suppose for the regional landfill operators, they have a quarterly air quality public meeting, a summary of the comments that were presented at that annual quarterly meeting would be good, because the times when I've gone to those, the information that's presented would be great to have at SWAC, and it isn't presented.
You're correct.
And a lot of those are around things like the methane. So how much methane is coming?
I
and
agree,
going.
I agree, Commissioner, that would be important to have in there.
Are you familiar with what Commissioner Cool is referring to enough that we could come up with some language or actually say, if you could say that again?
Oh, it's the quarterly air quality DEQ required air quality meeting. But you know probably the name better than me.
I think that's what they call it. I mean,
I think so.
I'm on a list of people to attend that
Yeah.
meeting. And I have attended not all of them, but some of them. And it is interesting, there's a lot of community input at those meetings. Although I think a
Yes.
lot of people have kind of felt like they come in and they talk and then nothing's ever done. Some people get frustrated.
Yeah.
They're really just talking to waste management. Once in a while, the two person is there, but not always. And so they don't feel like they're being listened to. I think in the past, the public does come here, and I think it's hard for the public person to come here and to raise a delivery issue or your garbage cans, your neighbors all leave the garbage cans out and the raccoons are now in your house or that kind of thing, which does happen through the county. And
That's
then
true.
when they come in here to talk, the head person they're talking to is the person who runs that business. And I think that's kind of hard to have them be the chair of the committee that you're trying to bring your complaint forward to.
Yeah.
And it actually is the person who you're kind of complaining about, is who you're talking to, and then you kind of feel like, oh, I guess I shouldn't be talking, this isn't really citizens, because I'm talking directly to the
Oh,
head of
yes.
that business. And I
That's
think
really
that's hard for people because we do encompass public problems. And I do say that Recology has been pretty good at giving us the information and often before the meeting so we can look at it. When we show up and they give us a 5-page spreadsheet and balance sheets and all these, and we're supposed to like look through this and like be able to make any kind of comment on it, it's nearly impossible.
Right.
And Waste Management has been really not good at giving us any information many times. They say, oh, we just don't have it yet, we can't get it, but we know we need this, and so Recology gives us a much better spreadsheets and details than we get from Waste Management often.
Okay, thank you.
I've seen those times when that information was just not part of the report, wasn't forthcoming, and I don't know if it ever got reported, but just sort of gets kicked down.
Right, given it 3 months after
Right.
we made the thing.
And it should have been part of that presentation.
Kristen.
Maybe if I could make a suggestion,
Please.
Perhaps it might be best to allow SWAC to work with Ashley to come up with what they think would be appropriate to include in the annual report, in the bylaws, and then we could present those bylaws to the board to act on. So you'd have a chance to make sure that you were comfortable with the details and the elements that they
Right.
discussed and agreed should be part of these monthly, quarterly, annual
Right.
reports.
Regular report.
Regular.
We'll call it.
Yeah, I don't have a
Regular
problem with
reports.
that.
Yeah.
Jennifer just brought up one thing that I don't think we've really hashed out enough.
Mhm.
because we've been talking about whether the industry should be voting or non-voting, is whether industry members, whether they're voting or non-voting, be able to serve as either the chair or the vice chair. We really didn't flesh that out. I definitely don't think whether they're voting or not, they should be able to serve as the chair or the vice chair.
I would agree with that.
So that would probably be in the bylaws. I don't know where that would be more appropriate, but in the bylaws, that they definitely should not be able, whether they're voting or non-voting, which to me is an ordinance issue, but I think the chair and non-chair is a bylaws issue.
It was suggested as an inclusion in sub C, which is the 2 representative companies that hold. A suggestion was made that they cannot serve as vice chair or chair, but I see that level of detail is just as reasonably in a bylaw.
Where are we, Mr. Chair?
I think that we've gone through a lot of the things on here, a lot of the comments. I think that the only thing that remains now is clarity around maintain at 7 members without an industry vote, or go to 9 members and include industry as voting members. And I think we could do any version of that too. We can do 7 voting, 7 non-voting, 9 voting, 9 non-voting.
I could stay with seven members if the industry is non-voting members. I could stay with 7.
Since I don't want to ever be accused of packing, sorry, I felt like we should have at least a
Oh,
joke about that in here.
It's certainly appropriate.
Thank you.
It's definitely an appropriate.
There goes our meeting. for
Analogy.
another hour.
Thank you. I would concur that I think keeping it at 7, having a full committee, and then moving the 2 industry positions to a non-vote, with the goal of having this be county resident driven committee. And that's how I see it, is that when the industry members are required to be there because it's part of the ordinance, and if they don't attend, then we will know about it, and when franchise fees come up, that will be something to consider. Is that I want to see this be a citizen-driven committee that provides us with sound advice that's been bounced off of different perspectives.
That's a very compelling argument. I just wanted one more clarification. As far as the franchise fee increases, that's a pretty strict formulaic. I mean,
Yeah,
you don't get to say you're naughty, you don't get a rate increase.
They are required under our existing franchise agreements to come before the board and present
That's a serious
documentation and justification for increases beyond the annual CPI increase. So it's certainly something that could be discussed.
I think it's
when
something
they're
worthy
here
of
before
discussion.
you to say, hey, we noticed that you haven't attended the last monthly, quarterly, however many meetings they've missed, and have that discussion, and certainly hope that they would continue to attend and continue to participate. But yeah, there is a automatic CPI built in that would apply unless or until we change the terms of the franchise agreement. But the increases that they are allowed under the agreement aren't driven by attendance at the SWAC. At the moment, they're not driven by attendance or not at the SWAC committee.
Right.
Well, a couple things I'll just like to close with is, number one is I think all of us agree that transparency is very critical, and I think this moves us more towards transparency. I think it moves us more towards where we're not. It moves us more towards citizen representative committees by having the providers be non-voting members or maintaining non-voting members, but as long as they can't be chair or vice chair. And it kind of takes me back. I look to the RIAC for a lot of how the RIAC is run, because I think the RIAC is one of the better committees, and I think well, gee whiz, if we took the vendor or the industry that we get most everything like the gravel industry, sand and gravel industry, would we put somebody that resides within Yamhill County who is a representative of a large company that the county may do business with from a contractor standpoint, Baker Rock or whoever it may be, would we put them on the RIAC committee?
Commissioner, I would just,
I was going to say something. but-
yeah, because we actually do.
Yeah.
While it's not specifically called that we have to have it, where this one's a little bit different.
Yeah.
It's not unusual, and we do have members of RIAC that are, employed with engineering firms. I'm thinking of one in particular.
Yeah.
that
Okay, I'll withdraw my comments.
That's good. There's a guy who's got a paving company who used to be on there.
That's not unusual, it'd be like having a landscape architect on the parks board. Or
Yeah.
having,
But are they
we
standard,
have real estate that are on the planning commission.
they're on the commission, but are they standard voting members and everything?
Yes.
Yeah.
They are on RAC. Yeah.
I withdraw my comment then.
And when it comes to
And
the
planning,
OJEC
too.
and the
Yeah.
rules around conflicts of interest and things like that, that's where that comes in, and where the individual, because we're all as public officials responsible for compliance with OJEC.
Okay, got me on that one.
He's actually looking for his
I
wrapper
think
right
it's
now.
time to revisit the RIAC and,
No, I understand where you're going, I just wanted to clarify that with the membership.
thank you, Ken, that was a
Yeah.
good clarification.
And in this case, it's primarily driven by the fact that we have to have them on because of the statute. And so our question is just, do we have,
Is there anything to talk about in terms of open seats? I don't know. Are there open spots on the committee now, or were we waiting to make these amendments before those spots were filled?
yes, is the answer.
Okay.
Um,
Didn't know if
You might as well just stay there, Ashley.
So currently, there's 7 members. Of those 7, we only have 5 that are filled.
Mhm.
So before all this happened, I was trying to fill those 2 positions. This is where we're at.
Yeah.
Trying to get them.
Well, I think it's critical importance now that we fill those, based on the direction we want to go, that we fill those 2 positions to let them go to the work on doing to reviewing the bylaws, what's already been done and doing that. So I think that's a high importance.
Mhm.
And let's wait. Oh,
So the reason why the other positions haven't been filled is,
we wanted to finish the membership.
so we
ordinance.
haven't, we've deliberately kept them open.
Yeah, exactly.
So we deliberately keep them over a couple months and we get the actual ordinance and approve the ordinance, which is fine with me too.
I guess we might as well.
With COVID and everything.
I would
budget
imagine.
going.
I mean, I see both ways, but I think at this point, we need to determine, like, we need to define what it is we're trying to fill.
Yeah, so I think the ordinance, I agree with you.
Okay.
Maybe Christian or Todd may want to talk about next step in the process with the ordinance amendment.
Well, we'll go back and try and craft some additional changes to the ordinance that reflect what the board talked about today, and then we can bring that back and go through a final review process, and then if there's any other revisions, deal with those, and then go through the adoption process. So it's pretty straightforward. Ashley and I were talking about the open positions and sort of the status of some pending applications that we've had for quite some time. And I believe I just heard the board talking about whether or not in trying to fill these 2 positions, you give some additional thought and attention to the types of individuals you might want, or which of the positions on the committee you're looking to fill. That may impact whether or not it's feasible to move forward with the applications that you've got on file, or if you'd like to reopen it again and have interested folks reapply.
And Ken has something he wants to add to that.
Well, and the only reason I wanted to talk about I don't know how quickly we can go through the process for the ordinance, but I do recognize that if now that you're better, more defining the vacant positions and what we have open versus the seats of, whether or not you would want to first get this ordinance, is this going to be subject of a hearing or?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to wait. I think if you're very interested in filling them, you could fill them now, especially since we're not moving from 7
Yeah, that's
to
what I was
9.
Yeah, I guess my only
yeah.
comment would be is that that once that, and the reason I'd probably vote that we, based on what Mayor said, that we actually hold those positions and not fill them yet and approve the bylaws or approve the ordinance, then send a copy of the new ordinance out to everybody that has applied and say, here's the new ordinance. And this is what's expected. Now, are you still interested in serving it? Because somebody looks at the new ordinance and say, I didn't know all this.
And there's good reasons for that approach as well. I think something else we'd also need to keep in mind is that while there are 7 on the committee now, only 5 of which are filled, the 2 industry folks are still voting members. And if we filled the 2 seats before changing the ordinance, then you would have 7. All 7 would still be voting members. And it wouldn't be until the ordinance amendments went into effect that you would strip the voting rights from the 2 industry.
Yeah, well,
Right.
based on existing guidelines and everything and timeframes and everything, I guess my only parting comment, I guess this is a parting comment, is that we have the ordinance and at least the committee working on the bylaws by December 31st.
Hopefully before that.
Yeah, but that's just my last parting comment.
That's your last
Well, it
part.
won't be my last parting comment, but on this subject, it's my
Oh, I have a
last
feeling,
parting comment.
Commissioner, that's not going to be your only
Last
parting comment.
parting comment.
Oh, it won't be.
Yes, how much time should we schedule for the last meeting? Right?
It
2 hours will do.
I just asked Ashley when
Yes.
I was thinking if there isn't a meeting scheduled for the next month or 2, we could maybe have these changes in place before the next meeting, but the next meeting is scheduled for November. So it probably wouldn't be realistic to circulate and approve the amendment changes before the next meeting. But after that, you currently meet quarterly. So if you stuck with that schedule, the next meeting after November wouldn't be until March of next year. February, March. Could certainly have this wrapped up by then. And that would allow sufficient time for folks to consider and review the changes, and then might also allow for a reapplication process. I don't know.
I don't know, I'd say my goal is that not only we put the ordinance in place as soon as possible, and we vote on and approve the ordinance, is that the SWAC, we would be able to fill those members and the SWAC be placed and working on the bylaws, to get the bylaws in place before the end of December. So
Ken
it'll
has a
go into
comment.
February.
Okay.
I was just gonna ask, because I know, with my limit, do we need to circulate the proposal? I mean,
That's what I was wondering about.
you
Thank you.
know,
But the ordinance, it depends on if it's adopted as an emergency or not. And I'd have to double check and see if there's
Well, no, I
any
know
limitation
that,
on this.
but that would still be subject to another public process. Anybody who had concerns with what's included in the amendment, it's gonna be public record. They can
There'll be a hearing.
before the board, they can provide that input. I'm just trying to think because, this was already presented to SWAC.
Yeah.
And we solicited comments, so we've had that and citizen comment, and I'm just thinking if in the interest of getting these positions filled and getting this amendment, it sounds like, maybe coming back and actually scheduling this for,
Would you like to try and do it before the November meeting? If it is a priority, we will make it.
I would
A
love to see
priority.
that.
I would too.
Yes,
And I know that
'Cause that
members
gives
of
the committee more
the
respect
greater
to start
garbage
on the
community would
bylaws.
too.
right,
Which would be done by December 31st.
absolutely.
Yeah, hold your feet. to the fire.
And we can also ask the chair to call a meeting
Shoot
too.
with
I mean, that's the current,
Don't waste it.
I was commenting that the current scenario in the membership ordinance allows for the chair to call a meeting at any time with a proper notice. So, I can ask the chair, Ashley can ask the chair. They don't have to do it. They don't have to listen to us, but
And also, is there an allowance for any kind of email votes? A lot of the times that's a possibility.
they've been meeting by phone, but you may be able to
They're
answer
doing
that.
like a conference call over phone. Like Marion County and their bylaws has a where you can vote by email. That's where I'm trying to get to. But I do want to point out, like, as far as timeframe, currently, all the SWAC members' terms have expired.
Right. Yeah, good point.
So,
So it looks like would be, is that even puts more pressure on, I think, the ordinance to allow us, if they're all currently expired, Ashley,
Mhm.
that allows us to appoint new members or reappoint existing members so they can start on the bylaw process.
Christian has something he likes to add, I think.
Uh,
It's nice
maybe,
that he's unmuted himself.
One suggestion would be to allow the committee, the meeting to occur in mid-November. In the meantime, we can work on the ordinance amendments, but have them go into effect January 1. So
Yeah.
they'd be in place, everyone would know what's coming. The current committee could meet in its current makeup on November 18th. Maybe even have an opportunity to discuss how they intend to conduct business going forward. Maybe get started on the bylaw process, knowing that this effective date is coming. And then it would give us a little bit of time to both have a meeting. And I guess that would, by design, then mean that we wouldn't be considering any of the current applicants, and you would likely restart an application process in the fall or January.
That brings up, don't say January. That brings up an issue though, and I'm wondering, and something based on something Ashley just said. If state statute says we have a solid waste and these are the members that have to be on it, and I don't know if state statute or county ordinance, and we don't technically right now, I would think if everybody's terms expired, we don't have a solid waste committee. Technically.
I know that for the
Nobody's-
planning
everybody's
commission,
expired, they never-
it's
I
it's
believe-
until they, oh, thank you. You were gonna say the
I
same
think
thing.
you're right.
Or does it
Okay.
carry on the way it is?
They remain on the board until they're replaced.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Christian.
I would like to see, I think you have,
No, and I think a lot of times we've had other committees where people's terms have expired and they stayed on just because we hadn't actually rubber stamped, you're renewed.
I would be happy to see the membership at the November 18th, like 18th, meeting consider applicants, because if we have a draft, ordinance, they can go on the draft ordinance, but it hasn't been approved yet.
Has the committee reviewed the existing applications already and made some recommendations?
yes, that's.
Yeah.
what the issue is.
So
That's-
you're talking new applications?
For the applicants, yeah, yes. And then I'm going to call on Jennifer Redmond Noble as well. And thank you for providing really the SWAC membership experience here. I appreciate it.
And this year has been the first time ever that we have considered applications. We never have, the commissioners always appointed them. And right now, with the makeup of our committee, you're basically just letting industry appoint them. And within your thing, I think we also need to have a thing, members actually need to attend so many meetings, maybe a year, to continue on through their term. We've had some people who are not really attending, but a lot of the committee meetings lately, the industry has the quorum. And so, because there's not that many of us, I'm not even sure for a while, I think there's only 4 of us maybe. And so if that's who they're going to appoint for the new members, I really would ask that you 3 appoint up to our 7 quorum to start a new term with, and then go forward from there. Otherwise, if we're gonna still voting members, they're just gonna, you're still gonna be an industry run committee.
Being that everybody's terms expired, I think Jennifer has a very valid point. Now we're gonna listen to Ken.
Yes. Ready.
Yes, Jennifer's experience has not been what I've observed. I guess I've always thought that our department offered to someone who was already serving if they wanted to keep serving. And I did ask Ashley, have you ever not offered someone reappointment? And she said, no, at this point she hasn't. I don't recall ever not offering reappointments. And, the committee and the whole conversation about whether to have voting or non-voting industry members, it's advisory. And so being advisory, they're just giving advice. And we, Ashley and I talked about having the members go to the committees, SWAC, to give advice on who they would like to have appointed. And I think it's odd that, the observation was that, well, the board always did this, we never got any input, but now that we've sent it to them to get input, it's only input from the industry. I don't see that as, making sense. That, we were trying to make sure that the committee got to have input, and the people that showed up are the people that gave it input. Ultimately, the committee needs to be made up of people that the board thinks is going to give them the best advice. And as far as, industry voting or not voting, at the end of the day, we provide the minutes of what the conversation has been. So even if you have, 5 people in favor and 2 people against, you still have that conversation that has been provided to you. So you have the advice of people that were in the majority, and you also have, in a way, the advice of people that were in the minority. So I guess I don't see that the industry voting or not voting is a huge deal, and that's one reason why I've remained quiet back there. But I think the question of membership is a big deal, and it's something that I did want to make sure that SWAC members will now get a chance to weigh in on. But ultimately, it's the board that gets to decide who that membership is, and we're going to try to do our best to be fair to the people that have been serving, ask them if they want to keep serving on the committees. That's what I practice. That's what the previous director practiced. I haven't known of any time where we've just specifically not invited someone to remain on a committee, and I guess that was a shock to me that was brought up as an observation, which I guess I'd like to know who it was that we didn't offer. But all I can say is in the last 5 years I've been director, I don't remember anyone that we haven't offered to reapply and beyond. And I can't remember anyone that I haven't supported to be reappointed. So just wanted to make those comments. I think this is an important decision, but I think the membership is very important. The voting, because it's advisory, has less importance, but there is always perception that you need to address. And if the perception is that it's too industry strong, then maybe that needs to be changed.
Right. Okay, thank you, Ken.
Thanks,
Do you have any questions though for Ken before?
No, I just had an observation, but
Okay.
I'll wait till
Yes.
So you bring up a really important, and I think it's timely, when you talk about members of committees that we always offer them the opportunity to reapply or to renew their membership. And I think we just had a situation like this with our investment committee, where one of our members was summarily dispatched without any information or the opportunity to reapply. And I think it was extremely concerning. I want to make sure that we as a county are not approving of or condoning that type of behavior, whether we do it in whatever committee, that when we ask citizens to serve in a non-paid volunteer capacity, that everything is transparent, that everything we do is above board. It hasn't been done in the past, but in this particular case, I think we need to use that as an example of what just happened in our investment advisory committee to one of our members, that we never do that in another committee. And this is a perfect example for us to walk the talk and not simply say this is how we do business, because otherwise there's really no integrity in this process. So
Well,
thank you for those comments.
Mary, I'd just like to tail onto your comment for a minute, and I agree with everything you said, and I agree, with Ken's observation, and I agree with Jennifer's observation, and that's therefore part of the problem. That, that Ken says that he can't ever think of a time. Jennifer gives a time, a specific person, which to me tells me there's a problem. But I'd like to know, as a county, I think one thing's critical for us, and this is more for Ken, I guess, is that we should know on a minimum 3-month schedule for the next 3 months, every committee and that has openings and who's expired. Because tell you the truth right now, unless I go through the book myself of all the different committees, I'm sure I'm going to find a lot that have expired. But I think it's more of a transparency issue. It's not that staff's doing a bad job at all, but I think it's more of a transparency issue that the fact that we're talking about this situation that both Jennifer and Ken came up with, that tells me there's a transparency issue. So, but that's all I have to say.
All right. My only comment regarding Director Friday's further explanation is that we rely upon the votes and the majority votes of our advisory committees to provide us with advice. That itself is advice. If we wanted to have people come to us, we could have everybody who's in industry or a diverse set of opinions for every decision that we make. They could come in here. And what I've noticed is that we don't even have minutes available until they've been approved realistically. At least I haven't seen minutes. And in the case of SWAC, when they meet 3 times a year, we're getting minutes much later. And so what I want to see is I want to feel confident in the advisory committee that they are grappling with that work. And then I take that. The reason why we have them is that we then take their vote and we say, we're trusting this. And if there's a reason where maybe we don't, then we'll have that conversation. We have that before. But on the most part, we rely upon them to do that grappling. So that's just my only thought, is that I want to make sure that we're not having to consistently dive into the reasons why. But along those lines, I love reading the minutes from the Planning Commission. This is one area where I make sure that I read them all the time because I love hearing how they are grappling with a subject. So I just want to make sure that you know that I love that.
And if I may, on the written minutes, just recognizing that a lot of times, almost all of our committees, they're not, just like on your own agenda, here on the next item is you're going to be approving a lot of the written minutes that are from June. And so when you have a meeting, a committee meet that meets even less frequently, there's going to be that lag time. On that. And I just wanted to mention that a lot of that has to do with staffing, and then also when you get the committee back together, they can review, provide input, and then adopt those minutes.
Certainly.
So,
And sometimes we have access to draft minutes as well.
Yeah.
So I acknowledge that. Do we have for Christian everything he needs?
Yeah, I think we've given you directions.
Certainly enough for us to take steps to provide you with the draft ordinance.
Okay.
The draft ordinance amendments. I think it's fine.
for scheduling purposes, is this going to require a hearing or not?
Yeah, if it's not adopted as an emergency, it'll have to be heard 2 separate hearings or 2 separate meetings, 13 days apart.
Mhm.
So, but we
I
can work
don't
on
think
that
it's
schedule.
really an emergency that we can handle as a non-emergency, because I know citizens, they think emergency ordinances are just another way of potentially getting by this requirement. So I think we should handle it as a non-emergency and just schedule for the time period of just like it should be for
Sure.
the end of December.
If you'd like, we can have the draft amendment for you to consider next week.
Oh, wow.
That would be
Fine.
great.
Would you like that? Okay. Sure.
Great.
The only one thing I wanted to point out, it's just literally shifting letters around, but under 3.5 duties of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, there's 2 sub-A's. That's all.
So you were saying you were going to have a draft available for review. I'm also-
For next meeting. Yeah.
For next meeting, but that doesn't mean that necessarily the board's going to take action on that, or is
I
that?
don't know.
going
I think we
to-
could do our first.
Would you like to take action on a draft next week? In which case we'll try and have it available by Friday, but may not be available till Monday. And then there would be the first reading, and then the second reading would follow
Yeah,
13
we've
days
had
later.
to comment with Todd Salvo, we have had things that came to us later than Friday.
Yeah. I mean, well,
Just checking to make sure you're listening. That's all.
Not you.
No, and I wasn't trying to push John on taking action. I'm trying to figure out if we need to do what this is gonna look like scheduling wise and when we're gonna get this on the calendar.
Would you like to have your first reading next week or the following week?
If we could do it next week, is that too much of a push?
Not for me, if it is for scheduling.
And then the only time there would be
Okay.
a push is if we had changes to it and decided not to do a first reading next week. If we get.
You can make
if
changes
can get it
between
to
the
us
first and the
where
second
we
as
can
well.
review it
Oh, you
prior
can
to
make
that,
changes.
Then I'm fine with
Okay.
first reading.
Yeah,
next
you
week.
could make revisions based on what you hear from the public or other
As long as we don't
conversations
get
that
it
you have.
Monday, or Wednesday
Because I just know-
afternoon.
I just know that some of the comment that we have is making sure that we have the sufficient time to have it in the packet.
Yeah.
You're being proactive.
Comments
Yeah,
or-
and if we're not doing it by emergency, folks will have 2 weeks plus whenever we make it available. And
That
we
sounds
can make
good.
sure that drafts go immediately to the committee members and any citizens who are concerned and interested in seeing the copies.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Before we move on to another subject,
yes.
I definitely want to thank Ken and especially Ashley for the work she's done on this.
Thank you.
I
Yes.
know COVID's put a whole nother wrangle into everything, and this is just one of those issues, but especially, I also want to thank Jennifer, because Jennifer's been keeping up on this, and she came in on her own time to provide comments and testimony on this issue today. And I see now that I feel confident we're moving in the right direction. I just want to make sure, see it get, it's just one of those things I want to make sure it gets done.
You want to actually check it off.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So thank
Yes,
you, Jennifer.
I agree. Thank you very much. We will end our work session then, and thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And
Can we
we,
take a little break before we
oh,
go?
yes,
Yes,
let's
thank
take
you,
a,
Jennifer.
let's take a
Thanks,
3-minute
Brian's
break.
not here anyway.
We'll recess.
Recess for.
We'll recess, and then we'll get Clerk Van Bergen in here as well. And we're still recording. Yes, thank you. Oh, perfect. Oh my gosh.
Do you have somewhere you can be?
I was supposed to be in the meeting, but I'm not just texting.
I think it'd be good if we could have a quick executive session to talk about.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I'm gonna double check with him to make sure. I don't have it.
But all I need to do is I need to make sure that I can, because we do our CSM. I just need to make sure that I can get home and get back like, well, yeah.
It should be taken.
Okay.
I mean, we talked about this, but it's just not.
Yeah. I know. Would you do it next week? Because I'm just thinking that,
Yeah.
it's gonna come and speak, and I worry that that's gonna. I just wonder about whether they change their minds.
Oh, God.
I actually haven't.
Well, what happened is, it's not the direction. I would either move forward with a draft contract.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the thing.
but I need to sort of know whether or not we're gonna continue down.
That sounds good.
So, that time.
Yeah, I think I can do it.
Yeah,
That's
if
what
they-
I'm
I
doing.
will find out from the two of them whether they have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I actually have to do that. But good job. Thank you for your help today. Yeah. That's a super long page.
turned the TVs on to HDMI, but they're saying there's no signal on all four. Just check the power of the device. Just use the pad to turn them on. We try something else.
Sometimes we have to send the signal
Not yet.
It doesn't like, she's not at the computer. But that way, is that better? But I guess you'd be able to log your computer. Anyway, she says in the clerk's office is closed, and I can't get hold of it, and she drives off. Well,
We haven't locked the
virtual hours operations, and they called somebody, glad you forgot. No. I said, okay, I will even get you. And then you can call, and you can make sure sometimes I'm about
Yeah, exactly.
share another
I didn't see all this. As long as you say parts of that. She said, I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't especially.
But how you should realize.
We'll see if we just, we actually practice. Totally, that's one. Thank you, I was like. I mean, I really wanted to do this.
We are live.
Because I figured based on our last conversation that there might be, here's my conversation, that there may be. Real properties. Oh, Carol. Yeah. Well, you know my opinion.
I didn't actually notice that, so I'm glad.
So Clerk Van Bergen, we've really enjoyed having you on our town hall meetings. But you got to be careful because you might be recruited by some bigger counties, much bigger than us. But the thing about it is you're getting your direct orders, you can't leave.
Okay, what?
Your orders from the commission that you cannot leave Yamhill County.
Yeah, right. We would have to change the term limits in order for that to happen.
Well, as an elected official, he could quit, or if we really get mad at him, we could have a recall petition, I guess. If he threatens to leave Yamhill County, we'll take care of Brian, we'll do a recall petition.
Oh, I like seeing that stack. Oh, well, he had a great post on Facebook of the stack of boxes of mail.
It's just all, Casey, it's all just great communications.
Yeah.
You know, we have so many department heads now that there, if I look back 4 years,
Mhm.
and I looked at today, the communications and the staff we have and how they communicate is so much better than before.
Nice.
But of course, we know who that is the reason why.
It definitely helps. I mean, I've heard from people that they really appreciate the management roundtable that they have every Tuesday.
Well,
I think it is.
I've actually heard too that, you know, with our meeting, broadcasting our meetings,
Mhm.
I've heard several people say that you really may not agree all the time, the cordiality between
Yeah.
the commission. You know, we have a fairly liberal and a fairly conservative.
I call myself the left-wing nut job.
At it, but I said, just there's none of this commissioner yelling at commissioner. It's more of a jovial, good, it's a good professional working atmosphere.
Right. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I know that you.
I wish you could say that next year. Which I think you will. I think it'll be that way.
I think so, because I think the two of us, I think we can work together.
Well, I heard people say that have been watching the
That's
video.
great.
Yeah, because my laptop.
Of course, I told them it took me 4 years to whip Mary into shape, but
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Commissioner,
I was like-
you have I'm scared to see what you're gonna do in the last few weeks.
You have nothing to be scared about.
No, I
wouldn't do
think
it- I wouldn't do anything you wouldn't expect.
I don't know what to expect
You're
anymore.
looking-
You're
I mean, it doesn't
You're
say.
defying all possible,
But you don't expect a lot more of knowing what to expect me when I'm out of office.
oh, well, I think that's when it's gonna be interesting.
Say I may not be in elected office, but it doesn't mean I'm not gonna be involved.
You're not going away.
Nope. Well, it's not my plans.
Good clarification. Just let me know when I can gavel us back in. I actually didn't know who to look at, so thank you. Being my leader here. Oh, yeah, I have to.
Where's Brian's Dropbox? Which one would you like?
So how do I find that?
Used to, but I haven't checked it since
Forward that.
the connection changed.
2 to 3 p.m.
We're good.
Yeah, we didn't need the cable.
The great shakeout has begun. An hour and 15 minutes ago.
We'll fix the aspects.
All right. Why don't we go ahead?
All right. All right, we'll come back into session from recess, which makes it sound more fun than it was. To a department update by the Yamhill County Clerk, Brian Van Bergen. Welcome, and I'm not going to speak for the board, but I am going to say, man, I can't believe you have the time to come here and see us in person, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you taking the time. How much time do we have? 5 minutes or 7?
For you, Brian, 10.
6.
4.
Great.
I've been to a lot of auctions.
Time's up.
Oh man, I love a good option.
Well, thank you very much for having me, commissioners. Appreciate it. If you have any questions along the way, please do chime in. I do not intend to take over and dominate the conversation. I do want to present where I think we are today in our department, and we want to make ourselves available to answer any questions you have. So please do not hesitate. As you all likely know or remember, our office does a couple of things. We are officially called the Yamhill County Clerk, but we are not an individual, even though I am an elected county clerk. When you record something in our office, you are recording with one of the deputy county clerks. Even though my name is officially on most of those documents, it is I'm just one of a team of people that do that work. And that is the same both on the reporting side and on the election side. By way of an update for our department, our recording numbers are up for this year. And you will likely, if you've not heard an update from the assessor taxation department yet, in our fall round of updates, you will likely hear the same thing from them, is that property sales are hot. Very, very few homes on the market that stay past a month. Apparently the inventory is really, really low, and homes are moving very, very fast. And that is true for property recordings, as those things tend to follow one another. As a matter of fact, we are up year over year 24%. The number of documents that we recorded, both
fiscal year and calendar year are roughly 24% higher than the previous point last year and last fiscal year. So not only are our homes moving, but the finance rates are super low. So a lot of people are refinancing. By way of update, the passage of House Bill 4007 in 2018, our value to record a document is now $81, even though our fee has not changed in 50 years. It is still only $5 to record a document. That is the recording fee. The rest of that are taxes and fees on top of that. And the bulk of that, the $60, is the affordable housing tax that has been laid on top of every document we record. Those of you that have been hovering around our office for a while know that we migrated to the e-recording model a number of years ago. And that has proved to save our customers a lot of time. We are today recording a document in roughly 7 minutes from the moment someone pushes the button on the title company side until we record it and have that document as a permanent record on our side, paid and received back to them. If that same process would have taken 3 days before we started e-recording. And as it so happens, e-recording has turned out to be a remarkable tool to keep business moving in the middle of a global pandemic. We are now upwards of 60% of all the documents we record. We're doing those electronically, and that actually started to move towards the 60% mark before the pandemic, and it's pushed that number even higher through the pandemic. And since the advent of House Bill 2425 last year, that allows people to sign recorded documents with an electronic signature, we do expect those numbers to even blossom beyond that. We're expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 80% of our documents being e-recorded in the near future. This fall marks yet another season's launch into the BOC program. For those not familiar with that acronym, that is the Board of Property Tax Appeals. And in Oregon, the value of a person's property is where the bulk of the taxes come from. We are expecting a lot of people to be interested in that program this year until they find out that the value is set January of every year, even though this huge pandemic started after that fact.
Yeah.
And then many people that will be interested in the program will be sad to hear that property values have indeed kept rising through the pandemic. So it'll be an interesting year for discussions between our office and property owners and citizens, and our friends in the Assessment and Taxation Office will have those same conversations. We have all those conversations because people come to our office, and our office is the place where they have to file those. So we will likely start seeing those conversations spike here starting next week. Last year, we only had 32 property owners file a BOC appeal, 60 the year before that, 25 before that, 36. So it's kind of hovering in that 30 to 60 range over the past few years. Just not sure what to expect this year. If people have been paying attention to the real estate market, they may not try to appeal. But if they are someone that's been directly affected by not working all year, they may truly want to come in. Or we might see some with personal property taxes trying to come and get some relief that way. So we do expect those interactions to start next week and then ramping up through the middle of November. On the passport side, our office has traditionally been the only place in Yamhill County where a person can come and apply for a passport without getting an appointment and anytime throughout the day. but we suspended doing any passport services back in late March and have suspended that through the summer. And we don't plan on doing any passport services until December, after the election has been certified. Put a pinch in some people's plans. The Dundee Post Office has maintained their processing of passports, but they've been doing by appointment only for a couple of years now. So it wasn't anything new for them to temper how many people they have in their lobbies for doing passport applications. But anyone that's in Yamhill County needing to get their passport processed, Dundee Post Office has been the source. The Dallas Post Office is another source, and then the next closest resource is in Marion County until December. It's been emotionally tough for our staff that really like to serve customers and want to help them out. But we are also in a pinch because the U.S. Department of State has been shut down. They have not been processing passports. It has just been this last week when they finally opened up emergency passport processing in Seattle. For 3 months, they had been doing no passports, and they hadn't even been doing expedited delivery. But now they're finally getting ramped up again, and an expedited passport is now available, but it takes 4 to 6 weeks to get an expedited passport.
Wow.
They're not doing regular passports inside of 12 weeks. But at least they're starting to work on their backlog, and we hope to get that rolling again very soon. Passport photos are a similar story. We had budgeted to take 1,400 passport photos this fiscal year. We are going to be lucky to get to 400. And that has been a significant revenue stream for us the last few years. We've been charging $15 a pop. You can do the math, 1,400 times 15 is a significant dollar amount that we will be losing this fiscal year. Any questions about passports, reporting, or anything so far? Another little thing that we do in our office is the election thing. You might know that that's been close. One thing that we like to remind everyone is in Oregon, all elections are conducted through their local county elections office. We are one of the counties that has an elected county clerk. Our neighbors to the north and to the northeast are hired elections officials. So Washington County does not have a clerk. Multnomah County does not have a clerk. They both have elections. We also like to remind people that we are always looking for election board workers, the kind that would like to come back and work election after election. We've been struggling for the 8 years that I've been here, trying to get one more body every year. We have over 50 people that have come out of the woodwork in the last couple of weeks wanting to help. So we've gone from scratching and clawing, trying to get one human into the building to help us. Now we've got more people than we have room to have help. So it's a nice problem to have in a bad sort of way.
Yeah.
But there we are. This fiscal year, we had budgeted for just 2 elections, the November general election that we're rolling into now, and then the upcoming May 2021 district election. And we were sweating it there a few weeks ago when we were close to a statewide recall, which would have landed just the week before the general election. Could have been a very challenging time for us, had we had all of our voters with 2 different sets of ballot envelopes on their kitchen table and 2 different ballots. And that would have been a logistical nightmare and considerable effort on the part of all voters in our office. That did not happen. That does not mean it won't happen between now and May of next year. So we don't know what's going to happen down in Salem with the legislature riling up again. About this time last year, we learned that we were going to have a special January election. So at the moment, we're still only planning on, only know of 2 elections, and we'll let you know if that changes. A little background detail of some of the election nitty-gritty. Today, our voter rolls have reached 73,215 active registered voters in Yamhill County. That's by measuring, we just had 50,000 active registered voters just 5 years ago. So it's a huge jump in the volume of registered voters we have and the ballots that we're administering. We consider part of our role to be that of an educator for candidates and voters alike. One of the reasons that our county produces its own voter pamphlet, our neighbors to the south don't create one at all. Polk County has no voter pamphlet. Yamhill County produces our own, and we do that for every election.
Excuse me, so there's no voter pamphlet available to Polk County voters?
For any local races.
For local
Local
races.
races.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they only,
Wow.
Polk County
Yeah.
residents only get a pamphlet
State.
when there is a state-produced
Mhm.
pamphlet, and then it is only for state candidates and federal candidates.
Wow.
They have no opportunity to learn anything about their county commission candidates, their treasurer candidates, their clerk candidates. There is no published document whatsoever.
Well, thank you.
Wow. That's crazy.
It's a bit peculiar.
Well, I appreciate the level of education that you give to prospective candidates. I know that a lot of people have expressed that to me when they're the first time candidate. So,
Absolutely.
and I'm sure you hear the same thing.
And it's the same with the Secretary of State's office at their elections division. They are
Mhm.
so patient and they walk everyone through. And you guys
Yeah.
have been doing that too.
I find them to be the same way from our perspective, and it's a nice resource to fall back on. We have reached out and participated in a number of education opportunities this last year. We meet with the Kiwanis and Rotary and Lions. We've reached out to student groups, been on the radio and some virtual meetings over the past few weeks and months. So those are all things that we try to do all year round, but things get a little more intense come election time. So we continue to try to do those things. The vote tally system is one thing that y'all helped us upgrade. That actually launched a year ago. We've already received a couple of updates, so we're working on the newest and best that is available in America today. We'd like to remind people that it is American made, and it is a system that is owned and operated by actual Americans. So we're kind of proud of that. It's not true in every jurisdiction across the country. So we like to plug that once in a while. There are things that we do. We do marriage licenses in our office, and we also perform marriage ceremonies in our office. We do business licenses, and we assist veterans when they've been discharged. We record those documents for free and have them available both for the retired veteran and their spouse for the length of their lives. By way of history, we typically do somewhere just over 700 marriage licenses a year, and we are already on track to exceed that this year. We typically do 80 3-day waivers a year. We've already exceeded 80 3-day waivers. So that means that people are coming into our office, applying for their license, paying the 3-day waiting period, and having their service done either that day or the next day. Most of that has been driven by the virus. So a lot of people are doing the legal components of their marriage ceremony, service, and license this year, and then planning to do events next year when they can get together in larger groups. So if you know anyone that has an event venue, they should be warned now that they'll have twice as many people clamoring as next year. So,
You know, Brian, one of the things I found very interesting is that when I was first elected, you know, we saw some marriages taking place outside the courthouse, ceremonies. But what I've noticed with COVID now, some of the complexity of some of those ceremonies, like with the horse-drawn carriage and the best
Yeah.
man, they're getting to be much bigger. The ones that you perform have gotten to be much bigger than
More
what
elaborate.
my envision they used to be in the future.
Yeah.
And I think that's because of COVID.
We see people get very creative.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
It sometimes gets a little challenging when you're in the lawn around one of our buildings and the neighbors are driving by with their diesel pickup truck. So it's a challenge, but we work through it.
There was one recently where you performed a ceremony. It was really hot. It was this summer on the front steps of the Fenton House, the commissioner's house. And I asked the bride and groom, could I post a picture on Facebook? It was a wonderful day. And I posted it on Facebook, and one of the comments was, it doesn't look like the bride and groom are social distancing. And I thought, are you kidding me? I didn't comment.
I have since stolen that comment and used it almost every time.
Totally.
I almost always make them kiss with their
Perfect.
masks on. So, yeah. Well, yeah. We try to have fun, try to keep them from, fainting and falling over when they're doing that. So normally adding a little spice to their service keeps them from fainting. So yes, you see all kinds, and you see lots of creativity. So by way of update from the technical and or capital improvement side, since we last talked, we had been struggling with our diesel generator in our basement for a number of years. It had not actually functioned since 2017. And since we last talked, actually last summer, our new diesel generator has been installed. It's up and running, tested. We've actually tested through loss of power, and we know that it works. All is right and well and good with our diesel generator. And just a few weeks ago, finally got the remnants of the old generator out of our basement. Still working on a few tweaks with getting the room redone, but we are now using that space for the election coming up. That space where the generator used to be locked up is now going to be the final resting place for our ballots as they head into archive. So it'll be a welcome use of space that we've not had before in our building. So it's a nice win-win-win.
Brian, I think that was a great project, and that's an example and I've always been against my years in the private service, is there's too much liability, even though they're vented outside and the tanks are outside, of having diesel or gasoline generators inside of a structure is, I think, nothing but a liability issue. Besides, ours didn't work. But having it outside, I think that's one of probably the best capital improvements of several little ones we've done in the county. That really makes a big difference from a safety liability standpoint.
And we really like it.
Mhm.
It's nice having it work and nice having it outside. One of the other problems that we've been struggling with the last couple of years is our 100-year-old building. The back patio has been falling apart. That has recently been patched. So if you head over to our back patio, you'll see that all the concrete patches have now been reset, and it's no longer a stumbling hazard. And we've been using it already, so it's much better, much improved. One of the things that we do still have on the horizon is the need to rewire much of our building. When the building was refitted for county use after the housing authority and that generator was installed, it was intended for many of the power outlets to be run from the generator, but it was miswired back in the day. So many of those plugs that had been intended to run off the generator don't. So that is one of those things that we will eventually come back to. So that's part of the things on the horizon that we want people to keep in mind. Another thing on the horizon is our push to convert from film only for old records to a digital format. Our film viewers are still in operation in our front lobby, but they are getting harder and harder to find replacement parts for and keep functioning. So not only is it a practical improvement to move those film images to an electronic version is the necessity to have those available for the public to come view. We're well into that process right now. We have converted all the documents to an electronic image. We are now in the process of importing those into a solution that is searchable for the viewing public or recording public.
Yeah.
We are still working on some improvements for our candidates, so hopefully by May of next year, our candidates for school board, fire board, and whatnot will be able to do many of those things electronically when they'll file their voter pamphlet. We do hope to have that completely available electronic. We made good strides this last cycle. Most of our candidates were able to file a voter pamphlet statement without coming into the building. Almost everyone was able to be handled that way. Had a few anomalies, but we got very close. We're making some improvements with our elections processing as well. Try not to let a good election go to waste without finding some new thing to do something better, to be more efficient, to be faster, and to be more accurate. So those are all things that we try to continue doing. One of the things that we now have with the migration back to our HART voting tally system is the ability to make an on-demand ballot, which will help us stop having to have thousands of copies of every ballot style on hand. We'll be able to produce one for the person that comes in the front door. And that will not only save a lot of time, it will be saving paper, but we'll be able to use a whole lot less space when we get that back. Ballot tracks was something we moved back to this last year and has become very popular with our voters. We received a bit of social media praise last night, as a matter of fact, from one of our voters in, I forget if it's Uganda or Chad, I forget exactly where she is, but she's serving as a missionary in Africa. And she got her notification yesterday afternoon that her ballot has been accepted. And she was just so ecstatic to be in the Central Plains of Africa and getting an email notification that her ballot has been received in our office and her signature match and her ballot's moving forward. And that is exactly what we want all of our citizens to know is available. When there's so much concern about the post office and drop boxes and all the stuff out there, it's a simple tool that people need to just sign up once. It's their choice of whether they get a phone call, a text message, or an email, but they get an instant message of their choosing when their ballot's been accepted in our office, or what the reason that we actually went this way is when there's a problem. They get the notification that the signature doesn't match, and our staff cringes every time I push that button, because it is every time I push that data out, we get a phone call back in 5 minutes. It is proven to be a great resource for voters to know that there's a signature problem with their ballot, and they are on it when they realize that it's just that quick.
A question I have on ballot tracks for my own personal. It says that if you go back to the last slide, Brian, it says refunded ballot tracks. Okay, for those who want, a voter chooses to receive a text or whatever, whereabouts in the process do they get that option of receiving so they even know ballot tracks exist? Where do they get that option of selecting if they want ballot tracks? Do they go to our website? Do they go to the ballot tracks website? What do they do?
Well, we have the link on the clerk's page on the elections tab. There is a little green button that says track your ballot. That pops up a window that is branded Yamhill County Elections. The voter signs in with the first name, last name, date of birth, and zip code. And if you're an active registered voter in our county,
Then you can register and tell which kind of notification you'd like.
then that individual voter types in the phone number where they would want the text message to go, or the email address where they want the email address to go. or
Yeah,
the
Mike,
phone number.
I think that's great, and that answered my question. It brings up kind of another question, is that for people who don't access our website a lot, have we ever done any advertising that says, hey, if you want to track your ballot, this is what you can do?
It's been in our voter pamphlet the last few elections, and it is again in this voter pamphlet that just came out last week.
So,
It is also, for the first time that I've tried this, on a buck slip that will be in your ballot packet when you get home tomorrow.
Okay.
So every ballot packet that we've sent out this election has a blue buck slip that has a QR code that links to our office's website, a QR code that links to the Secretary of State's My Vote application, a QR code that links to the post office's Informal delivery sign-up page, and a QR code that links to the ballot tracks sign-up page. And then a brief description of what those things are.
Okay, thanks, Brian, because that's great communications to give a citizen as we're pushing out their ballots, to give the citizen the information, and here's 4 different sources, QR codes. Here's 4 different sources that you can align, you can scan to use.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the transparency that people like to see.
All of our voters that have signed up for ballot tracks already got an email or text or a phone call yesterday that their ballots were sent to the post office.
I saw mine.
So that gives those voters a clue to start going down to their mailbox and looking for their ballot. It's especially handy for those of us that only go to get our mail once a week. So, sorry.
No, that was cited, that was
I'm with you.
very good job, Brian.
Yes. Informed delivery is not our tool, it's not the state's tool, it's the post office's tool, but it does show you every day what's coming in your mailbox. So that's why we're pushing that information too. Risk limiting audits are part of our internal process now. With the migration back to the HART tally system, we were able to do risk limiting audits on every election, and we have been. The last couple of elections, we've done these, and happy to say, and actually ecstatic to say, that we've been spot on every time. And if you're not familiar with that process, it is a completely randomized search and check system. Our traditional approach is having certified our election results, sending our results to the Secretary of State's office. The Secretary of State's office randomly selects 3 contests, and then we would go manually check those 3 randomly picked contests and from particular batches or precincts. Risk limiting audits is a global approach. So you're taking a contest and you're picking from all of the ballots, and they're randomly selecting from every precinct and from every batch. And it's much more complex from a search feature, but it is also much harder to fool or it's much easier to catch problems because you're searching over a much wider pattern. So it's now part of every election that we do. And then getting down to the nitty gritty and what everyone is experiencing and everyone's talking about is what on earth are we doing with elections during the pandemic. So just like you guys have done with Room for 2, we have spread out all of the areas where our election board workers will be working. We've got tables and chairs set up so that every election board worker is at least 6 feet apart from the next election board worker. And we're doing that where signatures are being checked. We're doing that where ballots are being extracted from envelopes. We're doing that where ballots are being scanned. We're doing that where they're adjudicating. So we're keeping our board workers safe, but just doing the math, you can tell that you can't have as many people in the room when you do that. So presidential election of monumental proportions, we should have 8 teams extracting our ballots from our envelopes, we are only having 4 teams. So in a situation where we'll have 70 to 80% participation by our voters, we'll have half the number of people that we should have processing those ballots. So it's super important that everyone realize that 4 years ago, when we went home at midnight, we had everything scanned and reported. This time when we go home at midnight on election night, we're not. And it's just gonna be the case everywhere across the country. We will likely go home before we're done. It's not because we're hiding anything, it's just because of math and space and requirements. Those of you that have been in our basement may remember that a couple of years ago, emergency management had been borrowing a couple of rooms in our basement. We are just about done with refurbing that into a usable space again. And this next month, the space that used to be borrowed by emergency management is going to be the lunchroom for our election board. So our real lunchroom with a sink and refrigerator and stove and whatnot is way too small to have more than 4 people in it. So we're using that as the launching pad for their lunches and breaks, and then we're having them go down our hallway into what used to be emergency management. And we'll have 3 different pods of 4 to 6 people having lunch around the table.
Brian, I want to drop back again, and I'm sorry for dropping back to the ballot track. And I've seen this ballot tracks. I've seen this issue before, and it's something I think you and Ken can verify. But when I went and signed up for it, I signed up for it on my laptop, and I'm accessing the county's mobile site. There is not a button for it on our mobile site. So and that's just an issue because they're technically 2 different sites that I think Ken just needs to verify and make sure it gets put out on our mobile site too, so it can be used on the phones. Because I have my phone right here and I was verifying, and there is nothing to allow tracking of your ballots.
From our page, or do you want it on your page?
No, on the county clerk's page, the regular internet, if you use your laptop, it's there. If you use your phone, it is not there, because basically they're 2 different websites.
I'm like, I kind of want to open.
They
my
look
phone
the
now.
same, but Ken knows what to look at to verify.
So in addition to that, while I'm doing this and talking about something else,
Yeah.
there is a significant push nationwide to go vote by mail. I probably talked to you guys about this already. Purchasing drop boxes, the physical purchasing of a drop box has become next to impossible in the last couple of months. Because just about every state is trying to ramp up to become a vote by mail state.
Right.
Or have some vote by mail option or absentee voting or something. Nearly every manufacturer of a drop box is backlogged weeks and weeks. Fortunately, we started early and we knew what we were doing. So our box at PCC, our box at Jakewood Park in Newburgh, our box at the Carlton Post Office, our box at the Carlton City Hall, and the Amity Post Office have all been updated to a newer, larger, more robust drop box. The box outside here at the parking lot has doubled in size. Fortuitous accident. I'm sure the person that drove over our last drop box didn't think of it that way, but it actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise for us, because that has always been a bottleneck for our office. That box gets filled very quickly in the old size capacity that it was. The new box is twice as big. So it's a sturdy, robust box that is twice as big as the last one. So it's all very good. We also now have a new location at the McNougal Public Library. So there is a set of book return boxes just outside the front door of the Mac Library, and right next to their book return boxes is our newest location for a ballot drop box that's right there. So people can drop off their books, and then drop off their ballot, and we're just hoping they're doing the right thing in the right box. We also put a new one outside our front door. So those of you that may remember about this time last year, we had a tour by a representative from the Department of Homeland Security. They came by and looked at our building in particular, and then each of the buildings on the campus that had some impact on our office. One of the recommendations was to stop using the wooden box inside our front door to collect ballots. Our solution was to put a real live drop box outside the front door. So it actually serves a couple of purposes. Voters can pull up next to our curb, run out, drop off in their drop box that's right there. And it's a much safer thing for our building, so we don't have a fire hazard right there in our front portico. So it turned out to be a good thing for many reasons.
Good.
So, do y'all have any other questions?
You guys always do such an amazing job, and I don't think folks have any idea that those audits, how important they are, and how every single time you've passed muster, and especially nowadays, that's really important for people to know. So thank you, and thank your staff. Always up to the task. Always do a great job.
We have a great group.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you very much,
You know,
Clerk.
Brian, as an elected official to an elected official, I have to say that your ability of what you and your staff do for the county is just phenomenal. It's funny you talk about the new drop box outside the clerk's office. I've gotten so many comments about that. Well, it's more symbolic, but it's just like, well, gee whiz, the county's making it real easy. Now we can drop off our ballots right at the clerk's office. Either they didn't know they could go inside under the old
Right.
wooden box or do it, or they didn't know that the one was really over here next to the jail. So the symbolism of just having that box in front of the clerk's office, I think made a big difference too. But yeah, your
I
staff
agree.
is just a wonderful staff.
Thank you,
Thanks
and
so much.
good luck. And thank you for going
And you
home
can
when you're
check, you
tired.
can finish checking out what I talked about.
I found it.
I found it too, but
On your mobile?
Yeah.
I didn't.
you have to
Maybe
click
it's
on
my mobile.
elections
Right,
to
that's
do
the-
it. That's the key, right?
Yes, we used to have it on our front page also. We used to have it in two places on our website. But when the folks ran into our Dropbox, I had to switch things around on our landing page. Because we had so many people saying that.
Okay, I'm under county clerk and election. I'm under county clerk and elections now.
And then you click on current year elections on the right side. Right, isn't that how you do it?
The subheader just above current year elections says elections.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So on the elections page, you should see three.
Oh, so it
different-
isn't on the landing. It isn't on the landing page. It's on the
Yeah, right.
elections page.
Yeah, as soon as COVID's done and like. and
You have a lot of
Got it.
information on the landing
I
page
found it
now.
on, I found it on the elections
As soon
page.
as I've convinced all of our voters that I'm not taking down all of our drop boxes, then I'll,
I think you're doing a good job of communicating that, though. I appreciate it. I think that I hear from many voters in our county who are really appreciative of how well and effectively you are communicating. So just,
Yeah, keep up the great
Yeah,
work,
thanks
Brian.
very
I'm
much.
trying.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for waiting.
Any other questions before I get out?
No,
that's it.
We're good, thank you.
so you can go back to work and do some election stuff now.
I will try.
All right, Commissioners, well, we will move on to our consent agenda. And item G1 under consent agenda is our minutes. And you've all had a chance to look at them.
Certainly have.
I would.
I'll
I'm reading
entertain-
lips, is
I
maybe
will-
what I was about to say.
Oh, I will entertain a motion that we approve the consent agenda minutes from the 5 sessions from June 3rd through June 25th.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? The record show unanimous approval of consent agenda, item G1. Item H is old business, and item H1, we have consideration of the adoption of written findings and conditions of docket number Z-02-20/SU-02-20/SDR-16-20, which is a request by Integrated Beverage Group LLC for a limited use overlay zone amendment, similar use determination, and site design review. The applicant is seeking to co-locate a distillery and related spirits tastings within the existing winery facility. The applicant and owner is Integrated Beverage Group LLC, and this continued from September 17th of 2020. You have the findings. Todd, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I'm sorry.
Did you have anything you'd like to add regarding the findings?
Yes, I just wanted to note that the findings were prepared by the attorney for the prevailing party. I just edited them.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
the board order itself was changed from the one that I delivered to you on Tuesday. It stated that it was an appeal, and in fact, it was not an appeal. It was because it included a change to the limited use overlay zone. It was a zone change, and the planning commission recommended and the change to you, not an appeal.
And I must say that I was a little bit confused when you told me that, because I only read the one that was in the packet, which is the one you edited to say that it's a recommendation.
Yes.
Does that make sense, commissioners?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I would move approval then of item H1 if there's no further questions. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item H1. Item H2 is consideration of the adoption of written findings and conditions of docket number NFD-01-20, which is an appeal of the planning director's approval of a dwelling not in conjunction with farm use, also known as a non-farm dwelling. The tax lot is 2427-200, just east of 22064 Northwest Russell Creek Road, Yamhill, and approximately 0.3 miles northeast of the junction of Northwest Russell Creek Road and Northwest Goodrich Road. The applicant was Stephen Belt, and the appellant was Elliot Rector. And this is continued from October 1 of 2020.
Mr. Chair, I will make a recommendation that we approve the final written findings, adopt final written findings for docket number NFD 01-01-20.
Okay. And the only thing I'd like to add is that, to be consistent, I declared a potential conflict of interest when we opened the hearing, and I'll declare a potential conflict of interest because I own farmland, even though I can't imagine a situation where we would have class 7 or class 6 soils. All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item H2. Thank you. Todd.
Thanks, Todd.
Yeah,
Very well.
you were
Thanks,
so
Todd.
patient. Move on, or maybe you weren't, but I thought so. Move on to I, which is other business. And item I1 is consideration of amendment number 3 to an agreement between Yamhill County and Siemens Industry Incorporated, which is board order 19-504 for modifications to the PLC/BMS system upgrade in the Yamhill County Correctional Facility, adding 3 thermal image cameras to assist with COVID-19 prevention and mitigation, and funded through the Criminal Justice Commission's COVID Emergency Supplemental Funding 2020 grant, increasing the not to exceed amount by $64,242 to $1,795,410. I'm pretty sure that's how it should read, because that's the amount.
That's the amount.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
And Commissioner, do you have anything to
the
add?
only thing I'll
As
say
liaison?
is after reading everything that the sheriff submitted and talking to the sheriff a little bit, my only concern at the beginning was if we were insured that in the Criminal Justice Commission's emergency supplemental funding, if this would be reimbursed or would be reimbursed. And so we didn't have to come up with any general funds to do it. It is my understanding that it is totally covered under that grant. So Ken, I'll turn it over to Ken.
Well, in fact, this isn't even a reimbursement.
No, we got the money.
It's a grant,
We
right?
have some funds. This is a grant program.
Yeah.
This is not coronavirus relief funding. This is a separate grant program for
And maybe where I was confused, because it says coronavirus emergency supplemental funding. So it makes reference to that, but in that case, I'd make a recommendation that we approve the agreement between Yamhill County and Siemens, which is our board order 19-504 for modification of PLC VMS system. And that would increase the amount not to exceed from 64, the 2000 fund grant, increasing the not to exceed amount from $64,242 to $1,795,410.
And it's when
It's actually increasing the amount by 64,
Okay, that's
not to
good.
exceed 64.
I can imagine.
So let me
that-
reword that. It would be for increasing the amount by $64,242 to bring the total not to exceed amount of the project to $1,795,410.
Perfect. Thank you, Commissioner. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record showing unanimous approval of item I1. Item J is public hearings, and we have none today. And item K is announcements.
And we have
Commissioners.
none today.
We have none today.
Thank you.
We have none today.
And we have none today. You know, I'm on a board with Carrie Martin, and she's taken up the whole lingo of this. And so I'm like, oh, yeah, we have none today. We have none today. I can hear her saying it.
So that.
Oh, my
I
goodness.
have one.
Turn it over to him.
We're to that time of the month again. Your current emergency declaration runs through the end of October.
Mhm.
So if you were interested in extending it, next week or the following week would be the last two opportunities this month to do that. Just a reminder. And then if we could, I'd ask if we could go into a brief executive session following announcements to talk about real property transactions.
I
Shouldn't take
believe
more
on
than
your
10,
first
15
one,
minutes.
Christian, we had discussed extending it 30 days till the end of November. I was for 60 days, but we discussed extending it 30 days, the emergency.
I believe it just extends at the moment through October 30th.
Oh, it's
Yeah, I think that's
to
what
the
it
end
was.
of this month. So
Correct.
that's right, because next month, then we'd have to do it again for next month.
Commissioner, would you be able to check in with Director Manfred about, we had talked about kind of providing the rationale for
Sure.
extending it?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely. Will
Thank
do
you very
that.
much. And then if we have, if we're going to have an executive session, I asked that we keep it tight.
Yes, because Christian and I have a very important meeting. So
Okay, well then we will close the regular session of the Board of Commissioners.